Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana and her sister were relaxing by the pool, while her parents and her older brother were cooking fish for dinner. The girls loved such days, when all the family rested. After all, they were a real rarity. The fact was that the Red family owned most of the businesses in town. They also owned several posh hotels, cafes, restaurants, and shopping centers. They owned a huge amount of money. As such, they didn't need anything. Parents, their entire conscious lives were spent working long hours while the children were taken care of by babysitters under the supervision of their grandparents. Michael, the oldest child, is already a big boy. He is 29 years old, so Mom and Dad are quietly bringing him closer to someday owning this empire and dealing with big money, very big money. Betty and Ethan, his parents for the past 4 years, have been bringing their son up to speed, trying to keep him busy so he can get up to speed as quickly as possible. Michael at first was not particularly eager to go into business. All the same, his whole life was carefree, and money would appear in his bank account within minutes of him letting his parents know he needed it. But when he turned 25, his parents decided it was time for him to learn how to earn, not just spend. Michael tried to resist, saying that he did not intend to work in this life, as the money that is in the account and their family, not only enough for him and his sisters for life, but also will remain for the children. All his attempts to get things back on track were in vain. Betty and Ethan were very persistent, so at a certain point there was not a penny left in Michael's account, and no new enrollment was coming in. He demanded that his parents give him back his full support, threatened them that he would do something to himself, go into a monastery. But Betty and Ethan were adamant. Mama and Papa told him that from now on he would receive money only as wages. But, as we know about the earlier banning of pants and hanging out at the club, employers do not intend to pay their employees. For 2 days, Michael did not leave his room, organized a boycott to his parents, but nothing helped. After that time, he left his room in the morning and went to his father's office and said he was ready to start his duties. Betty and Ethan were pleased that their son had made this decision. Sometimes they wondered if nothing could influence him, and if it would really be easier for him to go into a convent than to start making money. At first, Michael was entrusted with some minor tasks: sorting mail, confirming the date and time of a meeting with partners, sending faxes, and checking emails. Yes, you could say that initially he was a substitute secretary for his parents. However, they, in turn, felt that Michael should start at the bottom so that in case of force majeure, he could handle all the tasks. After all, when his parents started a business together, without a smart assistant, Michael was reluctant to do business. He did not like that his future depended on his parents. Very often he dreamed that he would develop his own business, not inherit his parents. But there was no choice. In parallel with his work, his father told him about the qualities that labor would be able to develop in him. Michael weakly believed in this, but over time he came to terms with his fate, so he began to take things more seriously. He had to abandon partying, as fatigue knocked him off his feet. Trips to the club were rare and only on weekends. Over time, he noticed that more and more girls were paying attention to him. Michael has never been deprived of female attention due to his financial status. However, even the majors have relationship failures. The small number of girls who were the most dainty for him did not pay attention to him as they had more inflated requirements for men, and they were not interested in one-night stands. However, after Michael started working, everything changed. In secular hangouts, a rumor spread that the young man began to deal with the affairs of the family business. The heir of Berea began to remarkable to himself the views of girls who were previously unavailable to him. It's very hard. His ego, although he knew that the fault is not his inner world, but money. Michael became more serious. Over the years, no one dared to make a cheap, ill-considered joke in his direction. Everyone treated him with respect, and only Adriana and Kathy knew what the young man was really like. With his family around, He was revealing himself to outsiders in new ways. He was softer, funnier, with his sisters. He liked to get mad and tease. And they, Kathy adored. He was always waiting for the next weekend with his family. So that work took a back seat. However, that rarely happened. Even now, when they are on vacation as a family, Michael and his parents are standing by the grill and discussing another supply problem. But one thing the girls knew for sure, as soon as they sat down at the table, all this work fuss would fade into the background. And so it was this time. As soon as the meat was ready and the mother put it on a beautiful dish, everyone sat down at a large table on the terrace adjacent to the house. During the meal, the family shared memories and news that were not related to work moments. Michael was the only one who sat in the darker shadows, not letting go of his cell phone. Betty and Ethan had already reprimanded him several times, but the young man didn't react to them at all. There was nothing the parents could do, for their son was no longer the little boy who could be deprived of pocket money or put in a corner. For half an hour, Michael diligently typed messages and then scrutinized the reply from the interlocutor, which came to his phone. When the dialogue ended, the young man muted the phone and put the gadget in his pants pocket. In an instant, Michael went from snob to funnyman. He began poking fun at his sisters. Sometimes his jokes would go so far that he would get a smack from his father. However, everyone knew that Michael was not saying all of this with malice. He loved his sisters very much and never let them hurt anyone, not even himself. Kathy was the middle child in the family. For the past few years, she had been very jealous of Michael's independence. She too wanted to start running the family business as soon as possible. The girl recently turned 22 years old. She is very ambitious and realized one thing, so that her parents would trust her to participate in building the family empire. She must perform at the highest level in her studies. Therefore, Kathy evenings, or even days, could not leave her room, spending time for textbooks and methodicals. The syndrome of the excellent girl affected her very strongly. It was not enough that she was the best among her classmates at the university. She wanted to be better than the teachers, even though she knew that the latter were annoyed by it. The girl was not afraid of their anger, because she was on a special account among them. Of course, this she owed solely to her parents, as they sponsored large sums of money to the institute twice a year. God only knows where the money went to the needs of the educational institution or into someone's pocket. Kathy hoped that her parents and brother would allow her to be involved in family affairs before she graduated from the university. However, the family had a different opinion on the matter. Michael had come to terms with the fact that he would be the sole heir to the business in 4 years. No, it wasn't that he was greedy and didn't want to share the profits with anyone. It was just that the young man had the notion that a woman couldn't handle such serious business. He was willing to give his sisters as much money as they would need to live a poor life. But he didn't want them anywhere near the empire. Their parents were completely against the girls taking part in the family business. They believed that there was nothing better for them than to relax and be busy building their own families. Betty and Ethan realized that sooner or later their daughters would marry, and only then would they be able to participate, but only through their husbands. The men Adriana and Kathy would choose had to be intelligent and successful. Only if they were so would they be allowed into the business. Otherwise, the families of the daughters would simply receive monthly subsidies for the rest of their lives. She wasn't happy with that solution. She was a feminist by nature. She would lose her temper when someone around her questioned women's abilities or said that women should take care of the family. There was nothing demeaning about it for her, so she was always jumping out of her pants, figuratively speaking, to prove her abilities. In return, she always received praise, which was said in a condescending tone, which made her lose her temper even more. Kathy had no intention of getting married and having children in the near future. She was not interested in the young men around her. In her head, she had set herself a barrier that she would be able to jump over and start building her family only when she was allowed to do business. She often took her brother's example, or rather, what he had become over the past 4 years, but she had outdone herself in that as well. became more cold-blooded out of nervousness. She didn't care about the feelings of those around her. Only her own emotions took priority. Because of this, her friends gradually disappeared from her life. The only ones left were those she had known since childhood, who remembered how she used to be, and those hopes that sooner or later everything would return to normal. But Kathy didn't care about those either. She didn't like the fact that most of her surroundings were too dependent on their own feelings and emotions. In her opinion, this quality in people prevented them from making the only right decision that would favorably affect their lives. Kathy sat with a serious expression at the dinner table and bragged to her parents about her successes in hopes of gaining their respect and receiving praise. Betty and Ethan listened to their daughter with smiles, but their tone was still condescending as well. Kathy stepped in even harder. This was clearly not what she had expected. Meanwhile, she sat on the chair with one leg tucked under her. The other was hovering in the air. She was genuinely happy. The girl always looked forward to such meetings. She was never capricious. When her parents or brothers started discussing any work issues during the holidays, she realized that it was very difficult to manage an entire empire. Problems or urgent matters could come up any day and at any time. Adriana just waited patiently for her loved ones to finish solving things, because she knew it was only temporary. Because of work, their vacations were rarely interrupted. As parents in most cases always found a solution to problems in the shortest possible time. And I was only 19 years old. But mentally she looked like a grown woman who had already seen life. Her parents were very fond of her. She was the most cheerful and kind child of all three. The girl studied well at the institute. Unlike Kathy, with the syndrome of excellent, did not suffer. She didn't care if she was better or not. The main thing for her was to get a good knowledge of law. She chose this specialization because she thought that every person should be legally literate in order not to get hooked by scammers, and also to know everything about their rights and responsibilities. Adriana knew that she would not work in her profession. More precisely, that she would not work at all. Unlike Kathy, the girl calmly accepted the fact that her parents and brother did not want the girls to take part in the business. She realized that it was very difficult, and only a shark could survive there, which she was not. Adriana was a romantic girl. She dreamed of having her own family and making a home as soon as possible. She never wanted to work because she saw from her parents. How much time does that take up? Betty and Ethan spent very little time with their children, missing all the important stages of their lives. First steps and words. Going to their first grade graduation. First loves and first breakups. This was all seen only by their babysitters, who sometimes managed to videotape all the significant moments of their lives. The absence of parents in their children's lives greatly alienated them from each other. There wasn't the kind of trust that usually occurs between mom, dad, and child. Adriana remembered it all, and her heart clenched with pain every time she remembered running to the babysitter to tell her the news instead of her mom, for example. She didn't want it to be the same in her family. Adriana realized that her husband would be 100% involved in the family business and would be a rare house guest. So she decided that she would not go to work even if she was forced out. The girl wanted to live all the significant moments of her future children together with them. Therefore, she was already watching various psychological videos that told how to build good and harmonious relations in the family and how to bypass all the obstacles that will arise. According to such a description, one can decide that Adriana was a very calm and cute girl. However, this was not entirely true. Since childhood, she got into all sorts of trouble and also threw herself into a fight with boys. If they managed to say something offensive to her, bumps and bruises followed her throughout her life. Parents were constantly grabbing their heads, tried to hold conversations with the girl, which are able to enlighten her. However, everything was in vain. There was not a single day until she was 14 years old, so that they did not fall into another situation. The daughter's behavior stressed Betty and Ethan, so they tried several times to hire an etiquette teacher who told her how a girl Adriana should behave. Such lectures only served to amuse her. since she believed that everyone has the right to behave as they wish, as long as it didn't break the law. Most of all, Adriana resented that her parents were not happy with the way she ate. But they found something to get at, didn't they? You have to eat in a way that tastes good, Adriana thought. It doesn't matter whether the greasy sauce runs down your hands or not, whether the baked goods, the people or not. Of course, at receptions she behaved quite differently, because she was not a stupid girl and did not want to make herself look bad. But at home one could eat as one wished. She had always been told that no man would want to live with such a woman. But she disagreed. Adriana dreamed how soon she would meet her love, and they would sit together on the homestead, grill kebab, and eat it. So her arms would be up to her elbows in shish kebab and gravy. Yes, they would. And now she was sitting at the table, tucking one leg under herself, and devouring a huge fat piece of meat with great pleasure. And her entire t-shirt was dripping with its juices. Adriana caught endless stares from her relatives, who looked strong, but she didn't care at all. Adriana's friend Benjamin was due to visit that day. She had been friends with him since she was a little girl. He lived in their upscale community in the house next door. It was with him that she got into all sorts of trouble. They were friends to the extent that they were able to confide even their deepest secrets to each other. Benjamin is a little older than Adriana. In about a month from now, he will turn 23 years old. He has always loved to spend all his free time with this girl. She never gets bored. Find adventures, not Adriana, not Benjamin. There was no need for anyone else, since they complemented each other completely. If one of them was sad, the other was always looking for ways to cheer up. They could laugh together, cry together, and get punched in the neck for their mischief. Sometimes, Benjamin felt as if he were experiencing something more than friendship. At such moments, he thought about what would happen if the girl became his life partner. Of course, all of his fantasies were both rainbow and ethereal. There was never a bad twist in his scenarios. Fate. After such musings, Benjamin had more than once thought of suggesting that they not date. There were several times when a young man had already bought a beautiful bouquet of flowers, planned the evening. He was ready to propose to the girl to go to the next level of the relationship, but at the last moment he threw it. What he feared most in life was that he might lose Adriana forever if she did not have the same feelings for him as he did. For the past 3 years, he had always suppressed the appearance of thoughts of loving her. Benjamin wanted to keep what he already had. Betty and Ethan were not very welcoming of the friendship with Benjamin. Of course, this was due to the fact that it was with this young man that their daughter was getting into various scrapes. They blamed the young man for the fact that it is he who provokes the girl to rash actions. They did not realize that things were exactly the opposite. And since this thought did not penetrate their heads, Benjamin was to blame for everything. In addition, the young man was the son of. This family was a competitor for Red. The Flanagans were also developing their empire. In their small town, so did the Red family. They were engaged in business activities in various fields. Their cafes and hotel restaurants were second to none in quality of service. They always went toe-to-toe, constantly conflicted with each other. And then, by chance, their children became best friends. Benjamin's parents weren't thrilled with his choice of best friend either. But unlike Betty and Ethan, they never told their son who he should be friends with and who he should shun. Benjamin was very grateful for this, as he knew that Adriana did not live an easy life in a world of constant inhibitions. The girl often complained to him about her parents' cautionary speeches, even if they applied to him as well. As the family dinner was nearing its end, the Red family heard the bell ring. Adriana quickly jumped up and ran to the gate, as she knew it was Benjamin coming. Her parents and brother and sister only rolled their eyes, not understanding what she found in this young man. Betty and Ethan often thought that she might give Benjamin some of the secrets of the family business, which he, in turn, would pass on to his parents and his competitors. Just from this thought alone, they were ready to lose their temper and go to screaming to try to convince Adriana to stop being friends with Benjamin. In the meantime, and it is necessary, ran to the gate, and having opened it, threw herself on Benjamin's neck. The young man hugged her back. From the outside, they looked as if they hadn't seen each other for years, even though they had just this morning gone biking together. But thank God, Benjamin, what took you so long? You missed the whole dinner. I really wanted you to sit with us. Hello, my dear friend. I'm sorry what happened. I really tried my best to come as early as possible, but all the circumstances were such that I was free only now. The girl stood with a serious face with her hands at her sides and without taking her eyes off the young man, and she clearly didn't believe what he was saying. She understood why things had turned out the way they had. She wanted to hear it from her friend, though, and she hated being lied to or not told something. Admit it, you just didn't want to come, and you delayed it on purpose. Adriana, what are you talking about? It wasn't like that. But you know your parents aren't exactly thrilled that I'm here. I think if I sat at the same table with you, they'd feel uncomfortable at the very least. I know these family days are pretty rare for you guys, so I just didn't want to spoil it. Benjamin, I completely understand all of this. I don't care how my parents, my brother and sister feel. I want them to accept that we'll be together forever, and our friendship is unbreakable. It blows my mind that after all these years, they still can't get over it. Adriana, I mean, that's what parents are. They'll always worry about you. That's just you. My family, and I know you're not in any danger. Your family doesn't think so. They think that if our families are rivals, then someone's bound to get hurt physically or mentally. It's like we're two rival mafia clans. After these words, Adriana rolled in laughter, took Benjamin by the hand, and led him to the table. The faces of the parents were very confused, as they hoped that the young man would not dare to disturb their rest. Nevertheless, each of them realized that it was necessary to portray a cordial and welcoming manner. On the faces of the parents appeared strained smiles, and Michael and Kathy did not even raise their eyes to the guest. Hello, Benjamin. What brings you here? Betty greeted her daughter's friend. Did you come here just for fun or with some news? Yes, hello. I'm very happy to see you. Actually, they invited me over for dinner. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it in time. Oh, really? Don't you know it's not proper to be late? Of course, knowing Adriana, I warned her right away that I probably wouldn't be able to make it by the appointed time. Then she told me to come when I had the chance. I finished my business and went straight to you because I missed Adriana so much. Benjamin, but you only saw her this morning. We went biking together. My dad joined the conversation. Oh, that was when. It's been 100 years. By the way, she and I never even called or texted each other after that. Believe me, that rarely happens to us. Yeah, we noticed Adriana was off the phone too. Okay, Kathy's gonna make you some coffee and you tell us what's new. Yeah, there's not really any news. I heard Fox finally moved to our town. My parents are always freaking out about it. Fox what? Did Betty and Ethan yell? Yeah. What's the big deal? That crook wants to take away some of our business. I think that's what your parents are nervous about. He can't get enough of everything. Why would he move to our small town from out of state, only to steal from our empire? Benjamin looked at his indignant parents, and they looked at him with a kind of bewilderment. He did not realize that some fox wanted to grab a part of Red and Flanagan's business. It was the first time the young man had heard of this character. He felt that if he had been told anything about him before, he would know why his parents were so alarmed by the man's arrival, and he would also understand the reason for Adriana's parents' resentment. The young men looked at each other. Adriana took Benjamin's hand and told his parents that she was going out. This time, Betty and Ethan did not oppose it at all, as their heads were full of other things. The young people headed towards the gate and soon disappeared behind it. Ethan, do you even realize what's going on? Why are you sitting so still? Why am I sitting so still? I'm just like you. I just found out Fox is coming. You expect me to make a decision and act in 5 seconds. Okay, I'm sorry, honey, I really overreacted. The first thing we need to do is calm down. At that moment, Ethan threw Betty a look. Okay, the first thing I need to do is calm down, if it makes you feel better. Yeah, the second thing is to find out why he came here. No, that's not the question at all. Why did he move here? Look, but maybe he was just drawn to nature. Yeah, that's why he chose the second most populous city in the region. If he was drawn to nature, he'd go to the country or the woods. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm just thinking stupid thoughts in my head. I just want to stop thinking as soon as possible that he moved here to steal from us. Do you have any idea how scared I am? This is such a dangerous man. I'm scared for our children, or rather, I'm scared for our girls. Don't worry. We're not gonna hurt the girls. I think the first thing we should do is talk to Flanagan, not Foxy. We need to find out what they know about his arrival. Maybe they know the real reasons, and only after that conversation can we move forward. Ethan, how do you think we're gonna talk to them? Have you completely forgotten that we're competitors? Betty, we're competitors who could be at the bottom in a second. And at the bottom, as you realize, there are no competitors. Everyone's equal. Do you want to go to the bottom? I don't. At that moment, Ethan took his cell phone out of his pants pocket and started looking for the phone number of the head of the Flanagan family. Once he found it, the man froze for a few seconds. It was clear from the look on his face that he didn't feel like calling at all, but the circumstances were such that they had to stick together. When Ethan pressed the call button, there was silence in the room. It seemed to take forever. In fact, he got an answer after the second ring. Go ahead. There was a pleasant male voice on the other end of the line. William, good afternoon. This is Ethan Red. Don't get distracted. Hello, Ethan. Why am I introducing myself? I have your number on my cell phone. I realize we're competitors, but we're still reasonable adults. Anything can happen. Can I help you? Yeah, you're right. I'm just making a habit of introducing myself. Michael's in charge of calling partners and clients. They don't even know what I look like or talk like anymore. William, you heard Fox is here. Of course I did. How did you hear about it? Ethan realized that Benjamin had probably said too much and shouldn't turn him, and parents needed to come up with a story right away. But prolonged silence could arouse suspicion. William, but you know this is a small town. Word travels fast. That's why I called you, to clarify, since I've heard it on the gossip level. Yeah, it's true. I suggest we get together, discuss it. This is exactly the time when we need to bury the hatchet and start working together. The words of William Flanagan sang. It is true that no entrepreneur can resist a giant like Fox, even if he has already built an empire in the city. In such a case, you need to rally together and think carefully about a plan. What did you do with these two men who were competitors until recently? The meeting was set for the same day. It was agreed that women, although they have a big part in the development of the business, not to take wives and daughters could spoil everything due to their emotionality. No one opposed this decision. No one except Kathy. The girl was literally losing her temper, proving to her father and brother that they were again infringing on women's rights. She was sure that she would show herself at the negotiations only on the best side. But Ethan and Michael stood their ground. It was time to act. The men went to the house to change. They chose casual suits in a classic style. The meeting was informal, so they could do without ties. After 20 minutes, they were ready, got into the Jeep, and headed to the restaurant where the meeting was scheduled. The facility was not owned by either Red or Flanagan. It was neutral territory. Ethan's Jeep was parked at the entrance. Once inside, the man found that there was no one in the room and only two men sitting at one table. They were William and Benjamin. It turned out that Flanagan Sr. had specifically reserved the entire restaurant for 3 o'clock so that no one could interrupt or overhear their conversation. William Manor raised his hand and invited the men to their table. To be honest, Ethan was a little offended by such a gesture that this Flanagan was allowing himself. Is he calling for waiters? Forgot who was in front of him. when the rage inside was starting to boil over. Ethan took several deep breaths and slow exhalations. He needed to calm down and become less picky about the members of this family. Michael was most surprised to see Benjamin at this meeting. After all, the young man had gone for a walk with his sister only 40 minutes ago. He wondered how in that time Flanagan Jr. had managed to get home, change his clothes, and get here. He really wanted to ask that question, but he decided to restrain his curiosity. "Hello, gentlemen. It's been a long time since we've seen each other in person like this." "Yes, William, it has. How do you do? I hope you don't mind me bringing my son. He's been a big part of our business development for the last 4 years, so he has every right to know what he's up against." "Of course I don't mind. You see, I'm not alone either. Benjamin has only recently started working for me, but he too must be prepared for anything. I understand that Michael, like Benjamin, has no idea. Who's Fox? No, I was hoping he wouldn't have to face him in real life, so I didn't tell them, to be honest. Michael was not very interested in the development of our businesses and establishments at first. At that moment, I tried to give him only positive information, but now he has matured, become more serious and wise. It's time to realize that the reality is not as smooth as we'd like it to be. You're right. Shall we begin?" After these words, William Flanagan began to tell everything he knew about Fox. Earlier, there had been rumors going around town that he was moving in with them. The women were ecstatic, because he was a single man and overly wealthy. The men, on the other hand, had their tails between their legs. William had to believe in the truth of these rumors only yesterday, when he received a call on his phone from Noah Fox himself. He couldn't believe it. The last time they had talked was at least 7 years ago, when Noah had set his eyes on his transportation company and tried to squeeze it out by all means. It should be noted that Noah had always acted legally, well, or near legally. No criminality. At that point, William was grabbing all the connections he could at the time. They almost succeeded in proving that Fox was going to take something that didn't belong to him. However, police officers and lawyers were afraid of Noah, and no one risked pressing charges against him. These rumors reached the regional city. At some point, the regional prosecutor called Noah and told him what was in store for him if he did not calm down. The men were longtime friends, so Fox decided to listen and settle down. This time when he called William, he didn't go around, yes about. The man got straight to the point. Noah said he'd gotten crowded in the regional town, wanted to move to a place where life was so vibrant and people didn't know him. "Fool, why are you making up stories? How can people not know you when your face is on TV all day long?" Thought to himself, Flanagan Sr. Fox informed William that he was going to expand his business and casually mentioned that he was very interested in the Flanagan and Red properties. At this point, William realized that he was in the biggest trouble he had ever been in. Noah never just said anything. If he said he liked those objects, it meant that he would do anything to get them. This is 100% information. Even if you are a single mother with 5 young children on your hands, and this business allows you to live a normal life, and is your only income, he will still take it away. You see, Noah Fox has never been known for kindness, humanity, or mercy. This man doesn't have his heart where it should be, stands a bill, a successor. If his account balance has increased, he'll be a little softer than a rock. So you won't be in any pain at all. Deal with him. The expression on Ethan's face changed. The man clearly realized that things were much worse than originally thought. Flanagan and Red began to discuss a possible solution to this unpleasant matter. It was no small matter. The issue was not unpleasant, but catastrophic. If what Fox hoped would happen happened, the two families would lose tens of $1 billion of their monthly income. At some point, the men's quiet conversation turned into an argument in raised tones. The waiters became uncomfortable and fled to the back rooms. Only the security guard remained in the hall, who was already on guard, as he was convinced that a fight was about to break out. The doors to the restaurant swung open. William Flanagan was about to cause a scandal, as he had specifically rented all the establishments so that no one could interrupt them. When he looked up, he saw a familiar silhouette, his mouth dry and his throat tight. He couldn't believe his eyes. Noah Fox was entering the restaurant, followed by a young man whose face he couldn't make out because the bright evening sun was scattering its rays behind him. As the man came closer, William and Ethan realized that behind Noah's back was Jacob, his son. The young man was a complete carbon copy of his father. His long, pointed nose and chin made his appearance speak, the way a trickster looks, which he is, eyes bright blue. The people around him sometimes felt as if they were afraid of the candlelight, because no one had ever seen Radu like him before in their lives. Jacob was dressed in a stylish suit, gray color white shirt, and around his neck was a red tie. His face was haughty. Jacob knew that now his father was eating up these small business shirts that had managed to establish themselves quite well in this small town. So all gathered together in such pleasant company, and we haven't been honored to be with you. Noah Fox started the conversation. A mocking smile appeared on his face. Well, it's not right. It's indecent. They are all newcomers to your city, you might say your colleagues. And you ignore us so coldly. You haven't been taught any etiquette at all. Noah, hello, replied Alec Flanagan. We were just sitting around deciding where to invite you. We wanted to gather with families. As you can see, we have no wives and daughters with us. There's no way we'd ignore you coming or moving. We did, didn't we? Have we become uncomfortable in the region? Noise and noise. People don't let us take a step. We decided to change the situation a little and settle down in the entrepreneurial plan in the new city. Ethan, how is your hotel business doing? Noah, not much. You know what I mean. It's not a resort town. No big influx of tourists. The hotels make a steady, small profit. Really? Well, I think you're cheating me out of my money. Oh, it's not nice of Ethan to cheat on his friends. Jacob and I are here for you wholeheartedly. I heard that your hotels are not really in demand among foreign tourists, and rooms must be booked at least 2 months in advance. So your profit margin is just what I need. What do you mean? There was a lump in Ethan's throat that prevented him from asking the question in a confident tone. His voice was a little muffled. I want your hotel business. I think we'll make a deal. Noah, I don't think I can sell it to you. I'm not the only one in the business. Michael and Betty are too. These things don't just happen overnight. Basically, we need to get a family council together. I never said I wanted to buy it from you. You see, I need to get a foothold in your town, and I don't want to start a business from scratch. Have you forgotten, Ethan, that Ethan didn't know what Fox was talking about? What's he supposed to remember? Forget how 20 years ago your business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and I loaned you a large sum of money. How could you do that? You said you'd remember it forever. It hasn't been that long. Wait a minute, Noah. I do remember everything. What you don't remember is that after 6 months, I paid it all back. You're right, you got every penny back, but no more. Is that how it works in big business? No, Ethan, that's what the 6 months were about. And you never thought to pay it back. That's 20 years worth of interest. You never said anything about interest. At the time, you said you were giving me the money with no strings attached. Isn't that right? Because interest is so commonplace that no one ever mentions it. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. Wow. So I didn't pay you interest, and you waited 20 years to take it. I'm in the hotel business. Are you out of your mind? Ethan was starting to lose his temper. He realized that Fox's arrival would cause problems for his family, but he couldn't have guessed that the problems would be of such a huge scale. The man was holding himself together with the last of his strength, so as not to lose his brand and trample his reputation by his own efforts. William Flanagan at this time sat relaxed. Since Noah Fox had not yet said anything to him, he hoped that the fate of being robbed would pass him by. However, as soon as a faint smile appeared on his face, Noah turned to him. William, you have a very good cafe chain from the circus. So many delicious dishes. I read your tax returns and marveled at how such a small business can make such an impressive profit. That's impressive. At that moment, William tried to replay in his head the memories when he had borrowed money from Fox, or when the latter had done him any favor that could have a big impact on his life. But he remembered nothing. As it happened, William and Noah were only fighting and competing, nothing more. William did not cross him, as that would only make things worse. A nervous smile appeared on his face. "What are you trying to remember that you owe me?" "You owe me your good attitude," Noah said, smiling. "But you and I also have a warm, friendly relationship. So let's show and tell everyone. I will gladly accept this modest gift from you and your family." "Noah, are you trying to leave us all pantsless?" William suddenly shrieked. "But why no pants? You have a lot of businesses, and I think that for the years of our friendship I can get you such a small gift from Ethan." The men stood in utter bewilderment. It could not have occurred to anyone that Fox's wishes would be measured on such an enormous scale. William and Ethan had thought that he would simply be bilking them out of large sums of money. But what was he going to take away? What have they spent their lives developing? Half their lives. No one could have guessed. Benjamin and Michael stood silent. Flanagan Jr. did not dare to open his mouth because he was very green in business and did not know how to solve the problems that Fox had brought down on their heads. The young man decided to adopt this silent tactic and not interfere with his father's decision that could change their way of life. Of course, if William had given away his cafe chain, their family would not have become destitute overnight. They'd still be rich. It was just that the income would be a little less. Michael, meanwhile, was also silent, but not because he was afraid of ruining everything, but because he was trying to understand what Fox needed from them. The young man guessed that it wouldn't be long before Noah made a suggestion. If Flanagan and Red agreed to it, everyone's empires would be intact. But the stakes were too high, which meant that the offer was not going to be the most palatable. But looking at Jacob Fox, he realized that he too was somehow involved in this. There were 1,000,000 thoughts in his head, but inside was the firm conviction that none of them were true. "Don't say anything." Guys interrupted the silence. "Fox Sr. afraid to hear what else you have to offer us," replied Ethan. "Suggestion. The only option I can think of is to leave your empires in this city." "Interesting to hear." "Scary interesting," William replied, emphasizing the first word. They were all really scared, for the stakes were high. "Well, your problems are solved with just one good decision. You see, Ethan." Noah turned to the head of the Red family. "Your daughter happens to be popular with the opposite sex. I don't know what it is about her, but she's certainly got a lot of energy. You wouldn't believe it. My son couldn't resist her at that moment." Jacob had a satisfied smile on his face. "It happens, Noah. Who better than you to say the heart can't do what the heart says? How many times has he changed his own? It happens, but I always got what I wanted. And my son should learn that from me. Get what you want, no matter what. Now, Jacob wants your daughter. Ethan, what can I do to help?" They'd probably go to the same parties. "All Jacob has to do is walk up and strike up a conversation," Ethan replied. He didn't want his daughter to get involved with the Fox family. "But you can't talk like that in their presence." "I approached her, but she didn't talk to me very enthusiastically," Jacob interjected. "I don't intend to dance around her either, you know, Fox, and you don't do that. I just need her." "Ethan, don't you have any idea where we're going with this?" Peter asked. "Frankly speaking, I don't understand what you want and why you came here, threatening to take away our businesses. Your daughter is to be my son's wife. Don't worry. He won't touch her until she's married. He'll be fine for a week." What did Michael shout? What wife? What week? Can't my daughter choose her own husband as a regular legal wife? Why are you looking at me like that? Your eyes will fall out of your orbits and you won't be able to pick them up. And milk off your own milk. He's a little excited at the news his sister's marrying such a prominent bachelor. "Noah, how can I promise they'll get married if Adriana has to make that decision herself? She's a woman. The decisions she has to make are what dress to wear and what lipstick to wear. For everything else, she has to rely on the opinion of the older men in her family. This conversation is starting to bore me. You have 2 o'clock to give me an answer. Otherwise, you will lose your children. Noah, I'm sorry. William got involved in the conversation. How does Ethan's decision affect my business? The thing is, Alessia, Adriana is not a distraction from your Benjamin. If she marries Jacob, your son must hide in the gloom and not come closer to her than 100 meters. Yeah, we're all good with that. Fox Sr. in the Medi is revived. No, Betty, you don't want to ask me. Started shouting Benjamin. Comrades from Fox, how do you think I should give up the man I've known all my conscious life? There's nothing between us, so why am I a threat to you? And let me ask you, what century are we living in? What kind of primitive society is this? Not a living human being with feelings and emotions, so why should she do something that's against her will? Because she's a woman, she's not naturally capable of making good decisions. I don't understand. You don't like it. You want to perform. Be careful, because the consequences of your stubbornness are what I outlined earlier. At this point, William pulled Benjamin back, showing that he'd better shut his mouth and accept Fox's terms of play. Noah, don't worry, don't mind my son. He's still young. Despite his age, the blood in his veins is boiling. I subdued him. He'll be quieter than the grass. Look, William, on your own responsibility. I don't really want to mess with spit and get my hands dirty, so to speak, Noah said in a stern tone. Ethan, I expect an answer from you tonight. If it doesn't come, we'll have to share. My friends, Noah and Jacob at the same moment turned around and walked towards the exit. The remaining men in the room sat there looking lost, and only Benjamin's face showed a look of rage and aggression. A flame was raging inside him. It was as if a volcano was preparing to erupt. He didn't understand why his father was so afraid of Fox that he was ready to close his son's mouth. Was there no control over this man? Apparently there wasn't. He had heard that in recent years, all high-ranking officials had resigned, and Fox's relatives and close friends had taken their places. Against such a man, no one could dare to go against him. Be it a policeman, a tax inspector, or even a prosecutor. No matter how hard Benjamin strained his meanderings, he could not quickly come up with a plan to save Adriana. He couldn't imagine his life without her. After all, his feelings for this girl were more than just friendship. Deep down, the young man dreamed that he and Adriana would be together. And if his parents could accept his choice, Betty and Ethan would do anything to prevent it. They didn't care how their daughter would feel. They needed to satisfy their own ambitions. As it was now, Benjamin was 100%. I'm sure Ethan would accept Fox's offer without hesitation, just to avoid losing a piece of the business. In doing so, the Flanagan family would be intact and their wealth would remain the same. While Benjamin was thinking, he did not even notice that they had already arrived home. A worried mother stood on the doorstep. William silently approached her, took her by the hand, and led her to his study. The young man did not follow them. He did not want to be present at this conversation. He entertained the hope that Adriana's parents would not agree to this scam. It was impossible. How could you sell out a human being for your material needs? Ethan and Michael drove home in complete silence. The young man's mind was racing with thoughts. He was trying to think of a plan to keep their empire intact, but not to keep his sister's independence. Ethan was morally ready to go along with Fox's terms. He was just working out a speech in his head that would convince his women that it was the only way out of this situation. Adriana, Kathy, and Betty were in the yard. Mom was bathing the flower beds, tidying them up. Kathy was doing yoga rather than reading a book. The women didn't immediately notice that their men had only returned when Ethan about K wandered in. They took their eyes off their own business and made their way toward the men. None of them said a word. Everyone was scared. Adriana wasn't scared. She just didn't want to look too frivolous in front of the others. So she adopted the tactics of her mother and older sister. "I'll tell you right away," Ethan started talking. "Things aren't going too well. Fox came to our town with only one goal, and if he doesn't achieve it, we'll lose our hotel business. And the Flanagan family is in a chain of coffee shops. The stakes are pretty high, so Noah's demands are very serious." "What? But how come, Ethan? There's got to be some kind of control over him. It's impossible that this man's life is rife with permissiveness." Betty's worried. "I've made up my mind. We're not accepting any of his demands. We go straight to the prosecutor's office. No to the regional prosecutor's office." "Betty, calm down. Nothing will really help here. What prosecutor's office? Have you forgotten who he is? The regional prosecutor? Do you want us to lose our pants altogether?" "Dad, what condition did Fox set you?" asked Kathy with a clever look, who took the whole conversation as a business proposal from which everyone should benefit. "It's the hardest thing to panic," Ethan said in a low voice, shifting his eyes to Adriana. The girl's heart clenched. Never in her life had her father looked at her with such steadiness. "Well, I'll tell you right away that what I'm about to say is not up for discussion. The decision has been made. Adriana, why didn't you ever tell me that Jacob was paying you any attention? If I knew who it was, maybe I would have." "Who is he? And what does that have to do with him?" "Jacob, Noah Fox's son. Turns out he's been in love with you for a long time. He's tried to get your attention a few times, but you've been soft on him the whole time. You see, he's got such a deep crush on you that the young man can't think of anything else but you. Okay, that's certainly nice, but if he didn't respond to me, he wasn't attracted to me. What does this have to do with you meeting New and Foxy today?" "Directly. Now I'll tell you about Fox's offer and my decision." Ethan hesitated. It hurt him to say those words. "In a week's time, you will marry Jacob. And tomorrow night is the engagement party. Period." What a chorus of screams. Betty, Adriana, and Kathy. "That's it. No arguments. We've never brought you into the family business, but now you can do a huge favor to keep our wealth intact. Don't worry, you're gonna be rolling in the dough. You know how much money Fox makes, right? Are you kidding me?" "Dad, tell me you're kidding, and it's just a prank." Daddy's getting hysterical. "Adriana, you're willing to get rid of one member of your family just to make more money." Whoa. Michael intervened. "Calm down," I said. "Adriana, what's so terrible about you getting married now? I don't understand your outrage. Jacob, good looking, not ugly. Even I'd say he's a handsome young man with a great deal of wealth in his account. Are you stupid? Don't you realize that everyone would like to be in your shoes? When I meet him in clubs, I see that girls are hoarding him, and all he thinks about is you. Do you realize what a happy married life you'll have? He's gonna blow the dust off you. What do I care how many girls he's got hanging all over him? I don't care about him. Have you ever thought about me getting into bed with him? How I'd feel in that moment? Or do you not give a damn either?" That's what Ethan yelled. And I said from the beginning that it's not up for discussion. And go to your room and start getting cleaned up. Mom will pick out your dress for tomorrow night. "Mom, why didn't you say something?" she cried out, not looking at her mother. "I think I'm right about everything. He's never made a wrong decision in his life. If he said that you will be good with Jacob, then it will be so." No tears have accumulated in his eyes. The girl usually never cried, but now there was no strength to hold back. She snapped out of her seat and ran into the house. So on the fresh lawn left footprints, as if she was like wearing soccer cleats with spikes. Adriana ran as hard as she could, but she felt like a turtle. She wasn't ready to accept her father's decision. It's her life. How could anyone else control it? Only she had the right to do so. The girl realized no one would let her out of the house. She knew the secret passage. It was hidden not only from prying eyes, but also from the video cameras that were hung all over the homestead. Adriana texted Benjamin half an hour later at our cafe without waiting for a reply, ran to her room to change and pack. She assumed she would have to flee the city today, to where she herself didn't realize, taking money from her stash. She headed for the backyard. There, a month ago, the wind had ripped off a metal profile that was easy to push back and get into the neighbor's lot. She wasn't afraid of the neighbors. They knew Adriana used it periodically to escape her parents' overprotective behavior. It took no more than 20 minutes to walk to the cafe, but the girl made it in 10. Apparently, adrenaline gave her strength, and she could not move in measured steps. Entering the cafe, Adriana was surprised to notice Benjamin at the table, as if he was sitting there. When she texted him, the young man twitched his leg nervously. She realized that her friend was aware of what was going on. Why had she called him? Adriana realized that it was pointless to expect any serious help from Benjamin. She just wanted to share her emotions and tell him that she was leaving. "Benjamin, I'm so glad you were sitting up when I texted you." "No, it's just that right after you texted me, I jumped in the car and drove here. Figured I'd rather wait for you than be late." At that moment, a call came in on her cell phone. When she looked, she saw it was her father. The girl dropped it, but a few seconds later, a call came from her mother. Then she decided to disconnect the phone so that it would not bother her and fray her nerves. "Are the parents concerned about the tone?" asked Benjamin. Yes, that's how she disconnected the phone. "Benjamin, do you even know what condition Fox made to my father?" "Of course I know," guiltily replied the young man. "I was at the meeting with them. I'm horrified at how a grown man could come to that inference. I hope your father thinks it over and refuses." "No, Benjamin, he has thought it through and agreed. I don't know how he doesn't feel guilty about selling his own daughter already. He's already thought it over and decided to marry you off to that smug turkey. Yeah, I guess he had enough of the 15-minute car ride home. And my mother says we should trust my father because he's never made a decision in his life that reflects negatively on us. But I don't understand why she thinks my life of suffering would be considered a pleasure to her. By the way, Fox made some kind of condition on you too. He wanted a piece of your business too." "What was your condition?" Benjamin hesitated. He didn't feel comfortable talking about it. He didn't want Adriana to feel obliged or guilty. After all, the conditions that Flanagan had set required minimal or no action on Benjamin's part. "Adriana, our condition is that I disappear from your life and never show up again." "What? So not only do they want to marry me off, they want me to form a new neighborhood. Are they crazy? Why do you have to disappear? What's in your way? They think you and I are too close. Sooner or later, our friendship can grow into something more." "What the hell is he breathing out?" said Adriana, leaning back in her chair. "They should see a doctor. They're all sick in there." "No, it's not crazy. It's Adriana." "What do you mean?" "Oh, of course, I wasn't prepared for this conversation. Adriana, you and I have known each other all our adult lives. I've never met anyone who was better for me than you. I started to notice a long time ago that I was drawn to you as a woman, not a friend. Unexpectedly. Why am I hearing about this for the first time? I have no right to know how you feel." "Yes, you do. It's just that I was afraid you'd be afraid you'd reject me. If that happened, I wouldn't have a friend or a girlfriend. I decided I'd rather have a bird in my hand." And he did. "Look at that husband, Lana." And she didn't start yelling at the whole place. Benjamin had a look of bewilderment on his face. He did not understand why his confession caused such a reaction. "Don't you all care how I feel? I'm your plaything. Then I'll tell you something, and then you can live with it. My darling Benjamin, you must realize that our entire friendship was not just based on liking you as a person. I've been in love with you since I was a little girl. Yes, I didn't say that because I was taught that the first step should come from a young man. But you see, chose the tit for tat." Adriana jumped up, grabbed her backpack, and was about to run away, as long as she was not in the company of traitors. She couldn't believe that all these years her feelings for Benjamin had been mutual, but he'd turned out to be a rare coward. All that time they could spend in each other's arms and feel supported. As she turned to leave, Benjamin grabbed her left wrist. "Wait, what did you say? I can't believe it. So you're telling me that jumping Tarzan, you weren't afraid to get into a kid fight. You weren't afraid to break windows to people who pissed you off. You weren't afraid, but you were afraid to say how you felt. No, you were afraid to open up and tell me how you felt. I was just waiting for you to make the first move. It's not proper for a lady to talk about her feelings. A young man might think she's imposing, and I didn't mean it that way. It's not proper for a lady. What are you saying?" Benjamin burst out laughing. "You're a fool. You're so mature. How could you hide it your whole life? Jesus, what kind of shit have we gotten ourselves into? It's nothing like that. I'll leave now, and then you'll come back, and everything will be better than ever." "No, you can't leave. It could get worse. They could find you and do bad things. We don't want that. I thought of something while I was waiting for you here. I'll tell you all about it, and then you can go home and get ready for the engagement party. You're crazy enough to think you can run my life. What kind of traitors are around? Calm down, and you listen to me." Benjamin forcefully sat Adriana back in the chair. The young man came up with a plan to save Adriana 100%. He wasn't sure of it, but 100% sure it was better than letting things go to waste. The girl listened to him attentively, occasionally resenting him and calling him crazy. As soon as Benjamin stopped talking, Adriana thought about it and decided that this was the best plan. She hadn't heard any other, though. As soon as they agreed on everything, she was ready to resent it. But then she felt that such power from Benjamin made her body tremble. She loved it. Adriana headed home on her own so as not to draw attention to her friend, the way he could get into trouble. "Where have you been? Do you even have a conscience?" Mom started yelling from the doorstep. "Why is your phone off? How could you leave without permission before such an important event? Mom, you think that after such wonderful news I didn't need some time to think things over? You could have done it in your room. I thought you were in there crying. I came to comfort you, and there was no sign of you. Okay, that's why I left, because I knew you wouldn't leave me alone. Stop yelling. I'm here. I'm ready to marry your smug turkey. What more do you want? It'd be nice if you'd change your tone to a calmer one and start acting like a Foxham family. I have to go rob someone." "Adriana, how many times? These are respectable people. I can see how respectable they are that everyone around here is tucking their tails. It's okay. I've had my say and I'm ready for my fitting. Did you get your dress ready for the party tomorrow night?" Betty nodded contentedly, took Adriana's hand and led her to her room. When they entered, the girl was speechless. Half of her room was furnished with hangers filled with dresses of different styles. Adriana was not very well versed in fashion trends, but she realized that in front of her were outfits from famous designers. Under any other circumstances, the girl would have started resisting the outfit choice, as she was not at all eager to marry Fox Jr. However, her and Benjamin's plan was precisely that she should blow dust in the eyes of the in-laws. Betty swirled around her daughter, relentlessly applying one projectile or the other to her, and she pretended as if the process gave her great pleasure. In principle, she didn't care what kind of dress she wore, and she didn't want it to be something inexpensive, since the outfit would be ruined. She just felt sorry for the money her parents would spend on her. But then the girl remembered thanks to whom she was in this trap and chose the most expensive one that was presented. Betty was a little surprised by the choice, because this dress was not at all to her daughter's taste, but it looked amazing on Adriana's figure, so her mother accepted her choice. Betty and Ethan were ready to spend a lot of money on this party, just so that their life would remain the same. However, the girl couldn't understand how life would be the same if one child was just yanked out of their family. They would pretend they never had one, or they'll entertain the thought that it's only for a couple of years, for now where Kathy is playing. and the girl's broken fate is completely out of anyone's mind. After the dress was chosen, Betty took Adriana to her dressing room where her jewelry was kept in a safe. They were exquisite handmade pieces from renowned jewelers. By selling them, the Red family could completely buy out the houses in their upscale community. Adriana had never seen all of her mother's jewelry in one place before. Her eyes went wild at the sheer variety. Emeralds, rubies, diamonds. However, the girl's eyes stopped on the amethyst, a lilac transparent stone that held something magical, according to Adriana. At least that's what the books she read said. In just a few hours, Adriana was fully prepared for tomorrow's event. Her mother was running around her with a joyful look, as if she was willingly and lovingly marrying the man she had been waiting for all her life. The girl tried with all her might to pretend, as if she had nothing against the engagement and subsequent wedding. Toward nightfall, she could no longer pretend. Tears were constantly coming to her eyes, and her mother and father could not leave her alone. When her parents finally let her go, she headed to her room, collapsed on her bed with all her might, and began to sob. Adriana tried not to make a single sound so as not to attract attention from outside. She didn't want to see anyone from her family, as it was believed that they had all betrayed her. When the tears were over, she picked up her phone to text Benjamin. The young man did not respond to her messages for a long time. Adriana began to worry. She thought he had decided to backtrack, and tomorrow's plan would fail. It was about an hour or so until the young man replied to her. Benjamin said he was near his parents the whole time and his phone was in his pocket, but silently so nothing could draw attention to it. Benjamin was sure that tomorrow everything would go smoothly. He was sure that they wouldn't ask, but would do everything as they had agreed. Benjamin's support helped Adriana to come to her senses a little, but inside her there was a real storm of emotions. Nothing helped her to calm down. Along with her worries came insomnia. The girl in the depths of her soul dreamed that today's night would fly very quickly. This ill-fated day would come, and she would have to endure only a few hours before everything would be solved. However, her body had completely different plans. Her heart refused to calm down, increasing its revolutions. Her brain was constantly churning out crazy thoughts about how tomorrow's engagement might unfold if things didn't go according to plan. Adriana tried to chase those thoughts away, breathing deeply and slowly to push the anxiety away. But it didn't help for more than 10 or 15 minutes. At some point, Adriana realized that it was already getting light outside the window. In just 3 o'clock, her mom was going to wake her up. The girl had already decided that she would not try to go to bed at all. But then she thought that she might make some mistakes in the evening because of her tiredness. Adriana put a pillow on her head to keep the light out of her eyes. She began to read a poem, barely audible in a whisper. At some point, she began to sink into the bottomless void that took her into the realm of morphine. And she did not wake up from the fact that her mother shook her and began to scream louder and louder. The girl came to as if she had passed out abruptly and opened her eyes wide, taking in a large amount of air with her mouth. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" With indignation, the girl muttered indignantly, "I can't wake you up. For 10 minutes now, I've been scared. I feel like you've been messing with me on purpose. So what I said is what you call bullying. I'm sorry, Mom, that the media has the same desires at night and in the morning as you do." Adriana sneered. "That's enough. Come on, get ready, come out for breakfast. There's a car coming to pick us up in 200 hours. "I don't get it. What car? Isn't this where we're having our engagement party?" "Of course not. How could you even think that yesterday while you were on the run? Dad and I found a gorgeous place that would be perfect for the event. Can I ask you more about what this place is?" Betty told her daughter that the event would be held in one of the best banquet halls. It was a large area with a flower garden, mowed lawn, installed fountains, and statues. The place was quite picturesque, yet this establishment was owned by the Flanagan family. That's how fate had played a cruel joke on Danya. In her distant childhood, she dreamed that their marriage ceremony with Benjamin would be held there. It was the most beautiful place she had ever seen in the city. Now her dream would be overshadowed. The girl timely thought about the fact that it is necessary to notify Benjamin about the change of venue of the engagement party. After all, their plan was that the event would be held at Red's house. When her mom left the room, the girl immediately grabbed the phone and dialed her lover's number. When Benjamin picked up the phone, it was clear that he was anxious about something. It turned out that he was already aware that the party would be held in their banquet hall. Despite the fact that he himself was worried, the young man tried to calm Adriana down and promised that he was thinking about further actions. The girl herself did not understand, but she believed Benjamin. She knew that he would do everything for her to be free. After calming down a bit, Adriana headed to the dining room, where the whole family was already waiting for her to have breakfast. Her parents looked as if nothing had happened yesterday at all. Michael was as serious as ever, doing his work at the table. Kathy looked at Adriana with a kind of reproachful look. "Kathy, are you in some kind of trouble? Why are you looking at me like I owe you something?" "No, sister. I just look at you and I don't understand why you're so ungrateful. You marry Fox Jr. and you look like you're marrying Gorbunov. You're telling me you'd marry him with great pleasure. If I were you, wouldn't I? As it is, you realize I don't want to get married until I'm in the family business." Adriana just rolled her eyes. She had nothing to say to that. It didn't settle in her mind why she should be grateful to her parents for selling her out either. But nevertheless, the girl tried to make the most casual look possible, continued eating breakfast, and then went to get dressed to go to the establishment where the stylists and makeup artists were waiting for her. An hour and a half later, Adriana and Betty were already there. The girl once again walked through the Grand Michaelm garden, which had fallen into her soul in her early childhood. Then she and Benjamin had run away from home to get there. The employees of the banquet hall knew that they came here secretly from their parents, but they never gave them up. They loved watching the kids and their admiring glances. Adriana stood near the fountain, remembering it all. A slight smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, Betty came running after her and grabbed her by the arm and dragged her inside. The woman was outraged that her daughter was being so irresponsible about tonight's event. Adriana didn't understand why there was such a rush. After all, it was more than 3 o'clock before the party. That would be enough time for the stylists and makeup artists to get all the guests in order. While Adriana got her feet behind Betty, she looked around to think of places to pull off the plan she and Benjamin had come up with. Fortunately, there were plenty of such places. Once she was sure of that, the girl calmed down and set off with peace of mind to see the stylist and makeup artists. In a small but well-staged room, 2 girls of pleasant appearance were waiting for her. They treated her very well. Every 5 minutes they checked if she liked everything. The girl loved to be treated like that by people. But unfortunately, she was 100% sure that this attitude was due to the status of her family, the status of her so-called fiancé. As Betty said, all the preparations for the party took 3 o'clock. Adriana was tired during that time, as if she had plowed the whole field of potatoes by hand. Her stylist and makeup artist wouldn't even let her go to the bathroom. They kept saying that they had very little time. The girl needed to tell Benjamin that she had found a few places that would help make their plans a reality. As soon as she rushed out to the restroom, she called Benjamin at once, telling him about the places she had reviewed. The young man listened attentively to his beloved, after which he said that she was a great girl and chose the right locations. The young man once again clarified from Tanya at what time she would organize the show, so that he could prepare himself for this moment. When they agreed on everything, Adriana hung up the phone. The girl only had to change her clothes. She knew her mother and stylist would not leave her alone. She needed to stash what Benjamin had given her yesterday. She pulled out a small roll of paper no larger than 1 by 1 centimeter and hid it in her bra. And she had purposely picked out a dress like this yesterday so she could wear it underneath. Once again, looking in the mirror, Adriana smiled to herself and whispered that everything would be fine and went to her mother's stylist. Upon entering the room, she was met with disgruntled looks from Betty and the young man who was apparently the stylist. The mother began to nag about Adriana's constant tardiness. The party might be disrupted because of her. The girl could not understand how the event could be disrupted because of her, if the groom and his family went to great lengths to make it happen. Even if Adriana had been unconscious, she would have been picked up under both arms, glasses put over her eyes, and pretended to be fine. Dressed in the very dress Adriana had picked out last night. Everyone in the room gasped. The outfit really looked great on the girl. It emphasized her beautiful curves. It hid any slight imperfections in her figure. Betty insisted that her daughter wear high heels. However, the girl was stubborn and said she would never wear them in her life. The dress was floor length, so any other shoes could be worn as they would not be visible. Betty waved at her daughter and told her to do as she saw fit. Adriana was glad that her mom gave in so quickly. It was important to her to wear the sneakers today. It would be much easier to carry out the plan she and Benjamin had in mind. When everyone was ready, she went to the window and noticed that there were already a lot of people standing near the gate. These people were clearly not invited to the event. They turned out to be reporters. The girl was pleased. They would help her escape. Cars were already pulling up to the parking lot one by one. Some of them I didn't know, but most of the cars were unfamiliar to her. At this point, Betty told her to get downstairs. It was necessary in order to greet the guests. There was no choice in the matter. So the girl agreed and immediately headed for the hall. Already in 15 minutes, the first guests came through the door. They turned out to be Adriana's aunt and uncle, as well as their children. Relatives sincerely congratulated the girl on the engagement, were interested in how they managed with Jacob to hide their relationship. In response, not only thanked and smiled embarrassedly. The girl hoped that with this arrangement the guests would not have unnecessary questions, or they would not demand an answer to the questions already asked. The aunt and uncle turned out to be very well-mannered, so they were satisfied with just a smile from their niece. Immediately after them, the guests started coming in one by one, and she didn't realize that the guests were coming in one by one. On her side and on Fox's side. When all the guests had already entered, Adriana wondered why her so-called fiancé was still not there. At one point, she felt like exhaling, thinking about maybe Fox had changed her mind about marrying her son to Adriana. As soon as that thought popped into her head, a man's hand slipped around her waist. God, Adriana, you look so beautiful today. No doubt you always look seductively strong. But today you have surpassed all my expectations. Let me kiss you. At this moment, the girl turned around and saw Jacob Fox standing in front of her. The young man did indeed look like a pompously turkey. She vaguely remembered him. Indeed, at one of the hangouts, the young man had approached her, trying to get to know her. Not that Adriana had rejected him at that moment, she just hadn't shown any particular interest. Hello, my lovely fiancé. Thank you for all the compliments you've paid me. The only thing you can kiss is my hand. You'll have access to everything else only after the wedding. Come on, Tanechka, we live in the 21st century. A bride and groom should try each other before the wedding. How can I marry you without sharing a bed with you? What if we're not right for each other in the same way? Jacob, if we're not right for each other, it's entirely your and your family's fault. You didn't expect me to jump right into bed with you after you and your father forced mine to sell me. No, sweetie. What if I'm still innocent? You see, darling, I've been saving myself all my life for my one and only husband, and as it happens, that's what you are. So you'll have to wait. But don't worry, it's only a week away. Oh, naughty girl. But that's okay. Right after the wedding, you and I will go to a hotel instead of a restaurant. And there I won't miss a single inch of your body that my fingers haven't touched. I'll explore all of you. I'll taste you in every way. You will be mine alone. Jacob hissed. I could hear the notes of anger and rage in his voice. He acted as if he were the hunter, and Adriana was his prey. After saying that, The girl smiled sweetly at him, kissed him on the temple, and turned to her parents to see their reaction. Of course, they had not heard what Jacob was saying to her. However, even a fool would have realized that there was a great tension between the two young people that was bound to come out sooner or later. Adriana was willing to tolerate exactly as long as Jacob kept his hands to himself. If it had been up to her, she would not have let him hold her this evening. But for the moment, she needed to blur the eyes of those around her. Everyone should think that they had been in love for a long time, hiding their relationship only because they were afraid of publicity. Wherever Adriana went, she was always followed by either her mother or Jacob. It is unclear for what reason they were afraid to leave her alone. Perhaps the fault of this behavior was that yesterday the girl tried to run away from home. But she was the only one who knew that she was going to leave for another city. The rest of us are just imagining it. Flanagan was also among the invited guests. Benjamin, of course, was not present. His parents were present at the party. Adriana noted what excellent actors they were. Both Benjamin's father and mother were so joyful. Their speeches sounded quite sincere, although Adriana then wondered if it was partly her own. You were really sincere. After all, thanks to the fact that the girl marries Fox Jr., their business remained intact. And wasn't it painful to realize how rotten this world was? Time was running out. Time to get into action. Guests tried time and time again to personally approach Adriana and Jacob to congratulate them on their upcoming nuptials. Even if it was all for real, the girl would be very unpleasant, because none of the invitees thought about the fact that she had basic human needs. She had been longing to go to the bathroom for the past hour and a half. When she and Jacob were approached by a married couple who were friends of the Fox family, Adriana did not hold back and said that she needed to go to the restroom. The guests were in a bit of shock, because such things are usually not said directly. But the girl no longer had the strength to humor and try to say some veiled phrases. Once in the toilet, Adriana decided to make sure that she was alone. After walking through all the stalls and not seeing a single person, she went to the door and turned the lock so that no one could enter. The girl walked over to the sink, leaning on it with her hands, staring intently at her reflection in the mirror. Now she was facing the hardest choice of her life. Either she marries a man she doesn't know, or she takes a risk, and if successful, saves her life. Living with this pompous manziuk, Adriana had no desire to live with. Her hand reached for her chest, penetrating under the fabric of her dress, quickly found the necessary paper roll. Adriana held it in her hand. She was very scared. There was no guarantee that everything would end up exactly as she and Benjamin had fantasized. Unwrapping the paper wrapper, the girl saw a pill with a slight guilty tinge to it. She needed to drink it. Her hands began to shake, but there was no way out. With a single movement of her hand, Adriana popped the pill into her mouth. With her other hand, she opened the faucet, leaned over, and began to drink. There was an unpleasant taste in her mouth, like most medications. The girl was afraid that the smell of the pill would be able to freak someone out, so she popped a lollipop into her mouth, which ended up in her shreds. The deed was done. Time to head to the gym. There wasn't much time left. The effects of the drug would kick in 15 minutes. In that time, Adriana had to sneak to the balcony. There were 5 balconies in the hall located on the 2nd floor, but she was not interested in all of them. She needed a specific one. The one on the left side of the entrance. It was perfect. But to get to it was much more difficult, because on the way there was a bar, behind which there were many guests who wanted to personally congratulate the future newlyweds with the upcoming wedding. And it was not necessary to send them all somehow culturally. The girl decided that she would refer to poor health. She was lucky, because most of the guests took it with understanding. Almost every woman talked about feeling the same way before the wedding. Behind her, Jacob was once again fading behind her, clinging to her more and more tightly with each passing hour. She needed to get rid of him, because she was to be alone on the balcony. All her arguments and requests were not taken seriously by the young man. Jacob finally came close to his dream. so he did not want to leave her for a second. He was afraid that he would lose her again. When Adriana and Jacob were already on the balcony, the girl felt a sharp deterioration of health. It turns out that it was visible even to those around them. On the face of Jacob appeared a kind of anxiety. "Adriana, what is it? What's wrong with you? How can I help you?" Jacob's voice sounded really anxious. Adriana was surprised that this man could have such feelings. She realized that now she had the only chance to carry out her plan. "Bring some water, please." The girl barely squeezed out of herself. She was getting worse and worse by the second. She needed to get close to the necessary part of the balcony, to stay where she was standing now. It only meant that the plan would be doomed to failure. Jacob gently let go of Adriana and jogged towards the bar to grab a bottle of cooling water. He didn't understand what was going on with the girl. She really did look very bad, even though she was fresher than everyone else at the beginning of the evening. As the young man tried to make his way to the bar, Adriana slowly but surely made her way to the right side of the balcony. Her consciousness behind the fog was fearful. She realized she was about to pass out. Her heartbeat became slower than usual. There was some extraneous noise in her ears. There were only a few seconds left. She could feel it. As she approached the balcony, she stepped a little over it, and after another 2 seconds, her eyes went black. "Oh my God, call an ambulance." "Jesus, poor girl. How did you do that?" "Have they started?" There are voices coming from all over the banquet hall. All the guests had flocked to the balcony. All eyes were fixed on the lawn where the body of the so-called bride lay breathless. Betty and Ethan ran up to Adriana. Her mother was rubbing her shoulders, slapping her cheeks, trying to bring her daughter to her senses. Nothing worked, however. Betty became hysterical. Tears appeared in Ethan's eyes. The man grabbed his wife, dragged her away to the corner of the building where they began to sob together in an embrace. Jacob stood on the balcony and looked at the girl's body, and the expression on his face carried sadness and grief to those around him. He couldn't believe that his happiness was so close and left him forever. "It's okay, Jacob. Don't worry. We'll find you a new wife. You found a beautiful woman. We have half of the invited guests, 10 times more beautiful than this," Adriana read. Noah Fox said in a cool voice. He wasn't surprised at all by what had happened. There was no sadness, grief, or sympathy on his face. The young man answered his father nothing, no matter what he said. Noah Fox would not have been taken seriously. By this time, an ambulance had pulled up to the establishment, and doctors ran out of it. They headed toward the body, and they bent over to feel for a pulse. They did a few more manipulations, and then they said, "Time of death, 1939. After that, a woman's scream was heard. Betty became hysterical. The only thing she kept saying was what she had told Ethan about Adriana not being left alone. No one present said anything about the fact that it was because she had been sold. The paramedics loaded Adriana's body onto a stretcher and rolled her to the ambulance forward, feet first. Everyone at the party was shocked at what had happened. In another case, people would have had the idea that it was a suicide. However, things turned out a little differently. Everyone saw that Adriana had become drastically ill. Therefore, the only reason for what happened, they considered a loss of consciousness, from which she fell over the railing of the balcony and fell on the lawn. The ambulance went to the city hospital without hurry, because there was no hurry. At this time, Betty and Ethan were beating hysterically. Their son Michael tried to calm them down so that they could go to the hospital as quickly as possible. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he was holding out hope that she would be saved now. After all, he loved his sisters so much, especially the youngest, who was always cheerful, loving, kind. When Adriana was brought to the hospital, she was immediately taken to the morgue. There was no pathologist on site, so the paramedics handed the body over to the orderlies. Logically, she should have been immediately loaded into a refrigerator. But the men did not. The paramedics asked why they had left her on the table. The paramedics replied that a pathologist would be coming soon to perform an autopsy. This answer satisfied the medical staff, who fled in an unknown direction. When the orderlies were left alone with Adriana's body, they immediately rushed to the desk. They opened the top drawer, which contained a syringe containing an unknown drug. They shouted to each other that there was no time to wait. It was necessary to do everything as quickly as possible. When one of the orderlies found the syringe, the other ran up to the body and started looking for the vein on Adriana's arm. As soon as it was found, the needle pierced it, and all the drug poured out of the syringe. After that, one of the paramedics started to perform artificial heart massage. After only 2 minutes, Adriana came to consciousness. The girl felt terrible. She had a pain in her head, back, left leg. Most likely, the injuries received after the fall from the balcony made themselves felt. When the girl opened her eyes, the paramedics began to rejoice as if she was their relative. One of the men grabbed his cell phone and started calling. Adriana could not make out his conversation, but the only thing she heard was the phrase "she was fine." She was conscious. The girls helped her up, got up from the table, took her chair. In all this time, Adriana did not utter a single word. She just didn't have the energy for it. When her breathing evened out and her heartbeat returned to normal, one of the orderlies put a mug of strong and sweet tea on the table in front of her, and the other brought a plate with pies on it. "You need to get your strength back. Eat your fill. This is all very serious. You've been through something that a lot of people don't wake up from. Let's face it, you took a very bad fall. You don't have a single fracture on you. However, the drug has weakened your body." Adriana reached for a mug of tea, made a few gladkov. She felt a pleasant warmth spread through her body. At that moment, the door to the morgue opened. A pathologist stood on the threshold. At the sight of Adriana, he staggered. The man had come to his workplace because he had been told that the corpse of a young woman had been brought in. He had no way of knowing that the corpse would suddenly come to life and drink tea with the orderlies. "Don't worry, calm down. This is the girl we told you about yesterday. Did you forget? Oh my God, I really forgot about her. Honey, how are you feeling? Did you examine her? She doesn't have any fractures." "No, she's fine." She turned out to be very lucky. To be honest, I thought their plan was doomed to fail. Apparently, she really didn't want to marry that kid. Adriana remained silent as her mouth was occupied with the pies, which at that moment were tastier than all the delicacies known in the world. She didn't yet fully know what was going on. When she and Benjamin had discussed the plan, the only part of the plan was the sound of it. The first part is the one that says that Adriana needs to specifically take a pill that will promote gradual cardiac arrest. It is because of this drug that the paramedic failed to recognize in her. It was because of this drug that the paramedic failed to recognize in her barely vulnerable pulse, which is why they pronounced her dead, and she did not know that she was to be brought to the morgue. However, she did not assume that his staff would be alerted to this. She was afraid to start talking because she felt like she would be immediately turned over to her parents as soon as they showed up on the hospital's doorstep. The orderlies kept talking among themselves, including the pathologist in the conversation. Sometimes, they marveled that in this day and age one could still find such situations where children were married to each other against their will. They called Adriana and Benjamin the real-life Romeo and Juliet. 15 minutes later, Benjamin burst through the door of the morgue. When he saw his beloved alive and unharmed, sitting wanting a brownie, he threw himself at her feet. Grabbing her hands, he began kissing them, moving higher and higher and up to her lips. The young man whispered to Adriana about how much he loved her and that he would never let her go again in his life. "Sweetheart, I realize you've been through something terrible, but we're running out of time. We have to run." "Okay." Sighs. At that moment, Adriana let go of the cakes and the mug of tea. She got to her feet, staggered a little. Benjamin put his arm around her waist to help her walk to the car where she could change into normal clothes. It was a black designer dress, only drawing attention to herself. The young men said goodbye to the orderlies and pathologists, thanked them for their work and walked out. The car stood 10 meters away from the morgue. Adriana walked very slowly, as she had not yet had time to regain her strength. Benjamin picked up his lover in his arms and ran to the car. He put Adriana in the back seat so that she could change her clothes while on the road. He jumped behind the wheel and drove as fast as he could to escape from the city and then from the region. A happy life was ahead of them, with neither his nor her parents. That was the least of their worries, as in life you need to have people close to you who will never betray you. Subscribe and click the bell.
She's so uncomplicated. Ethan smiled, and his smile was surprisingly gentle and dreamy. Who? John wondered. They were in a nightclub, but the loud music didn't stop them from talking. Separate rooms with excellent noise insulation were provided for solvent clients. The guys were not just solvent clients, but also regular and very generous with tips. Therefore, this small but very cozy office with panoramic windows and a mirror ceiling was, you could say, assigned to them. So who's the uncomplicated one? Ethan snapped out of his dreamy reverie and for some reason whispered, Slaga, she is such a... Listen, I honestly haven't met anyone like her. Her father owns a tire shop, a businessman, a hard worker, and the girl is not spoiled by life at all. I asked her where she likes to vacation. So she told me, you know what she said? You won't believe it. She says that at the cottage father says fishing, and they then from this fish caught, food cooked, fry it, and with boiled potatoes eat and soup still. Liar. John stared at me. You're a fool. She's playing a joke on you, and you believe it. What kind of girl would have fun like that, as if she's already retired? That's ridiculous. No, wait, I see what's going on. Where's their summer house? Did you ask? Maybe in Cyprus, maybe. No. It's just a little tree, 40 miles out of town, inherited from my grandparents. And that's where he and his daddy have their place of power. They go fishing, pick mushrooms, berries. Listen, she can make jam, and she dries mushrooms and pickles them. What a great girl. She says she starts her mornings with exercise and douses herself with cold water to avoid getting sick. No, but have you ever seen such girls? Not in the movies, but for real. Everybody else has a fitness center and a personal trainer and a healthy diet, and she's exercising in cold water. Aha! And fried fish and chips, plus jam. You're looking for exotic, aren't you? John asked me glumly. I don't even want to ask where you found it, but I'll advise you as a friend. Get rid of her before it's too late. You don't know these country girls, and they're clutching, she'll grab you and that's it. You won't realize how married you'll be, and then you won't get divorced. She'll grab everything she can reach, and you'll be left without pants. Oh, come on, don't make me sad. Ethan grinned. You haven't seen her, Clara. She's like a Cinderella, friendly, kind, and good at everything. Her eyes are like this, and all the time she seems to be surprised. I'll order her a coffee and a cake, and she'll have a happy look on her face. At the Moody's, take her hand in the dark, and she is already shining all over. And when I kissed her for the first time, I think she then even the whole night could not sleep. Knave, she's so cute and sweet, you could fall in love with her. Did you fall in love? No. Ethan wrinkled his nose and looked like a hedgehog about to sneeze, but then changed his mind. What kind of love? I've been with so many girls, I don't think I'm capable of falling in love anymore. You remember Thumbelina, don't you? I got bored beforehand. That's 100% me. And the girl? What about the girl? Well, beautiful but funny, but you'll meet another, even prettier, even funnier. If you fall in love with every girl, you won't have enough days in your life. John suddenly winked conspiratorially at his buddy. Listen, doesn't she have a girlfriend? Because you tell me so deliciously, I even thought I might be missing something in life. Jam, for example. You look for it, Ethan said arrogantly and burst out laughing. Come on, don't be so slow. Go to any cheaper club. There are 100 of them per square meter, and all hungry. You'll treat them to a cocktail and take them to your place. John remained silent, and Ethan suddenly felt sickened by his own cynicism. Ethan had been living in a sticky jam for a month now. It had started out so nice, so funny. Clara, in her colored sundresses, with her long hair and perpetually surprised look, her willingness to admire everything he said, to rejoice at any, even the cheapest gift. Ethan sometimes bought the girl the cheapest chocolates on purpose, just to test her reaction, but she was as happy about them as if she'd been given diamonds. She was so sweetly embarrassed and always asked him to turn off the lights. Every day she wished him a good morning. Yes, everything was so light, funny, plush, like a video clip of a couple in love releasing into the sky, balloons, hearts, and then, holding hands, going to an ice cream parlor. And then it happened, and I had to thrash around, twist and turn, come up with original moves, lie. Lying was the most painful of all. Ethan was more and more confused, with no idea how to get out of the horror that had come over him and pinned him to the ground. The horror looked exactly like the two purple stripes, parallel to each other, on a pregnancy test. It was the test that the idiotic Clara had presented to him by calling and scheduling an urgent appointment. Come right now, please, she asked. I have such news. In short, come. What's wrong? He asked, surprised. Have the aliens taken over the planet? Ethan, this is not a phone call. Come quickly. It's very important. I'm waiting for you. The girl didn't bother to explain. Ethan was very worried then. The demand, the urgency. It was something out of Clara's repertoire if she said it was urgent. Intuition, of course, was not dormant. Ethan suddenly remembered how, a couple weeks ago, he and Clara had decided to go out of town to a wild beach and had had a wonderful time there until late in the evening. They didn't even want to leave, and she fell in love with the place and kept repeating, I will live here. I like it here so much that I want to stay here forever. Ethan understood her, he wanted to, but he wanted it to be like this. Warm but not hot weather, the water glistening, and for Clara to walk around in her bathing suit, and for them to be as old as they are today, 18 and 19. He would build a shawl then, right here on top of the hill, and in the evenings they would burn fires and drink cheap sweet wine. A picture to remember. He said out loud, What is it? I want to say that I will remember this day and keep it in detail, like a photograph of you and me living here all our lives and not growing old for a minute. It's like a snapshot, only not with a camera, just with your eyes. He kept in his memory this picture of eternal summer and eternal happiness. However, there were no pharmacies nearby, but Ethan somehow hoped that it would be lucky. And if he hoped in vain, oh, not for good. All this urgency. Oh, not good. What if the wild beach left them a mark in the form off? What the hell is this? Maybe Clara just saw a cockroach and now he's afraid to move, or a mouse. He didn't notice how he accelerated his steps towards the girl's house. Whatever happened there, it was better to find out as soon as possible and not to be tormented by doubts. And maybe it would turn out that there was nothing to worry about. Maybe the girl just needs some help. You know, like move a couch. A couch would be nice. He ran up the stairs to find out, finally, what was the cause of Clara's anxiety. Here's already her floor. Ethan didn't even have time to ring the doorbell, but Slaga jumped out into the entryway in a bathrobe, clutching in her fist a strip of paper with 2 dashes on it. Ethan tried hard not to think about where the test had been before it was picked up. "Look, look!" the girl shrieked, smiling so contentedly that Ethan immediately wanted to run away. Of course, Clara, with her usual stupidity, didn't notice anything and kept shoving the object of her idiotic pride under his nose. Well, what to do now? I wonder what kind of reaction she expects. That he, too, would jump with delight, pick her up in his arms and start twirling her around? Or fall to his knees and start kissing her still flat belly like in the movies? Yeah, a bad movie. "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" "Is that your face? You're not happy." She finally figured it out. "I should be happy. But are you happy? It's our baby, yours and mine. Isn't it great?" "Yours is." Ethan blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. But as for me, that's a moot point. He knew he was saying a nasty, insulting thing. He knew that Clara didn't deserve them, but he was saying them, and now, at this very moment, he wanted them to be true. "How do I know? Maybe I wasn't your only one. You didn't swear fidelity to me, did you? Maybe you were seeing someone else at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised at all." "How? How? Why?" Because. Do you have proof that you didn't go out with someone else, that you only went out with me?" "No." "Well, I don't have any proof either. So why should I believe you?" The girl's huge eyes instantly filled with tears. "Ethan, look, there's 2 stripes, that means." "I know what it means without you telling me." "It's okay, it happens. But what does that have to do with me?" "Who else?" "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" "I'm not with anyone else." "Here's a test, check it out." "Don't give me that test. I've seen it. I'm not interested in what it says, Ethan," he asked, squeamishly pulling away. "Well, where? Show me." Clara slammed her eyes shut resentfully. A crystal tear ran down her rounded cheek, her eyes large, open, amber-colored. At first, they seemed childishly enthusiastic and naive. Where had it all gone? It was as if the enchantment had dissipated in an instant, leaving only the surprise of his own blindness. Where was he looking before? Naivety, delight. Now he realized it was not enthusiasm, but elementary stupidity. Too bad it was too late for him. "I had no one else." The girl whispered in a trembling voice. "You know you haven't." "How would I know that?" Ethan started up. "Do you think I've been following you? I mean, who else could have been involved? I'm just saying. You go to the doctor for an abortion. If there's anything there, you have to pay. Fine, I'll pay. But then we break up because I don't want to do it again. Especially from a girl I've never been sure of. You'll get pregnant again, and then you'll want to pin it on me. No way." To the doctor, there was a voice from behind the door. "She's going to register, to observe the pregnancy." "Who the hell is that?" The boy was confused. The door of the apartment opened, and Ethan saw a man in old sweatpants on the doorstep. Apparently, this character was the future grandfather of the 2 stripes and the daddy of the dopey, blissful one. In addition to the pants, the man was dressed in a shedding T-shirt, which favorably emphasized his emerging potbelly. His vast baldness was a strange contrast to his thick, dark mustache. His gaze was ferocious, a real monster. "Good evening, young man." The monster said hello politely and without any transition, grabbed Ethan by the shirt on his chest and pulled him closer. "It's going to kill him." The boy thought and squeezed his eyes shut just in case. "Definitely will. My name is Christopher." The monster growled, breathing in the guy's face. His breath smelled of fish and something else alcoholic. Beer, probably. "Ethan," the boy wheezed. The shirt on his chest pulled taut and rattled threateningly. "Nice to meet you," continued the monster who called himself Christopher, continuing the conversation. "As you may have already guessed, I am Clara's father. Before you say anything in your defense, I feel it is my duty to inform you that I will not tolerate rudeness. This almost refined politeness, combined with the creepy paw rubbing his shirt and the horrifying face in close proximity to Ethan's face, had a paralyzing effect. The guy didn't dare open his eyes, and he didn't even think about trying to break free. "If you hurt her, you hurt me, and it's dangerous to hurt me," growled the monster. "And now a second warning. You will marry my daughter, because my grandson must be born in a legal marriage. Maybe you have not yet had time to propose marriage, Clara, as befits a decent man. Well, now is the time to do it now. That's what you were going to do, like a real man, not a trashy little bastard, right? Am I right? Am I right?" With each new phrase, the monster shook the guy vigorously. "You're right. Yes, yes, of course. That's a smart boy." Christopher, unclasping at last his mighty hand, carefully smoothed Ethan's shirt and patting him paternally on the cheek. "Because if you had been a shameless scoundrel, capable of abandoning a pregnant woman, I would have made a cutlet of you and fed you to my dog. And now I dare not disturb you anymore." The monster smiled and disappeared behind the door. Ethan slid along the wall and sat down on the floor. "Is your father crazy?" he asked. "Or does he always act like that? Or only with guests?" The girl glanced at the door and pressed her finger to her lips. "Speak quietly." "Daddy's hearing is phenomenal. He can hear everything through 3 doors. You'd better be quiet. We're getting married then." Ethan mumbled and covered his face with his hands. It's a nightmare. It was impossible to believe what was happening. The next day, Christopher personally drove the couple to the marriage ceremony and made sure that the applications were written in the proper form and accepted as they should be. At the same time, he kept glancing at Ethan as if he expected the groom to run away or act crazy. "Clara said you're not a poor guy. He said it after the applications were filed. Of course, it's good to have something to live on while my wife is at home with the baby. Well, how are you doing? What do you do for a living?" "Where? Nothing," mumbled the guy. "Work is bad now. They pay me a trifle everywhere." Christopher nodded. "That's true. But no one ever got rich on a paycheck like that. You should try to organize something yourself." "All right, it's solvable, but what do you live on?" "My parents give me a little. They've got." "Well, I see. I see. Don't go on." The future father-in-law waved away. "Well, Clara?" He looked at his daughter. "Congratulations. You found yourself a lazy man with an ego and a slacker. And this daughter," Christopher unceremoniously pointed his finger at Ethan. "This one, look closely, is your future husband. What do you think of that?" Well, the girl lowered her eyes. "Things are different now, aren't they?" "Right, Ethan. He's a family man now. I think he'll be able to work and provide for me and the baby." "You think so?" Dad grinned. "Well, think. It's my business, but if you want to know what I think, I'll tell you this. This Major doesn't like to work and doesn't know how to work. If he could do something, he wouldn't be on his parents' back. And if he didn't know how to do something, but he loved it, he'd be trying to learn something. But that was before, Daddy, and now. He doesn't love you either," Christopher went on. "And his father is, I apologize, like a pig, a snow-white swan." "Come on, Dad. Shut up. You asked for my opinion, so stay out of my way. And here's my advice to you, my daughter. Send him away. Right after the baby's born, he's no use to you and won't be. This way you'll have a child in marriage, and you'll get rid of the stone around your neck. Girl, you're beautiful, you're smart. You'll find yourself a nice guy with a head and a heart. And this one, he glanced contemptuously at Ethan. He'll never be a man again. He's all right on the face, handsome, but there's nothing good about him except his face. The face changes with time. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's in trouble. Now this car mechanic with 3 grades of education is going to sit there and insult him. Dad, don't, asked Clara, pointing her eyes at the groom. It's unpleasant for him. And in general, of course, you have a lot of life experience, but maybe you're wrong. But it's unlikely. Can I, said Ethan, who up to this moment had been gloomily silent, stop insulting me. I'm your daughter's fiancé and the father of your grandson. Who gave you the right to behave like this? Hiya, nobody yet. If you want to prove your worth, get a job. Think about a place to live. And by the way, start taking care of your fiancé. She's pregnant. She needs rest, proper nutrition, light emotions. The doctor said Clara needs fruit and vitamins. Go and think about it and get her that. For starters, the next day, Ethan was walking through the yard of his fiancé's house and could not answer himself the question, what was he doing here? A heavy bag of fruit and vitamins for Clara was weighing down his arm. Humanitarian aid for pregnant fools and very heavy. Christopher opened the door for him himself and held out his hand for the bag. Did you bring fruit? Good for you, come on. Clara is not at home now. I sent her to the cottage in the morning. Let her get some fresh air. She'll be back on Thursday. I'll tell her you came by. Ethan was not invited to come in, and he remained standing, staring dumbfoundedly at the cheap sodden door. Why am I here? Again he asked himself, but there was no definite answer to that question. Most likely because not to come to leave Clara, no matter how stupid she was, would be to agree with the characterization that this disgusting type, her father, had given him. And also because he was scared. This really Christopher, a man without a tower, such a man will unscrew his head and then surrender to the authorities, but only unscrewed, it is no longer screwed back in place. Screw it all and skip town right now. And then what? Daddy has long ago and quite unambiguously made it clear to his children that either after receiving a certificate of higher education, they stay to work at his company, or they cannot count on the inheritance and at least some financial support. This means that to run away is like agreeing to a miserable existence, to be lost on the streets, and to fend for themselves. Ethan shakes his head, as if he hoped to shake her out of her fears and any other unnecessary thoughts. I had to think of some way out of this, and as soon as possible. But, as it turned out, no reasonable ideas appeared, and it was clear that he could not do without his sister's advice. Clara stood at the window, watching Ethan nervously pacing the sidewalk in front of the house, probably thinking about something, and certainly nervous. He sent you some fruit. My father shouted from the room. I left it on the table in the kitchen. And why did you deceive him that I'm at the cottage? Asked the girl. I heard. Christopher stood on the threshold of the room, leaned his shoulder against the jamb, and looked intently, very seriously at his daughter. I wanted to buy you some time, he said, for you to think calmly whether you want him or not. You see what he's like. He's neither fish nor flesh. A slug. Then why did you ask him to marry you? I pressured him, of course. I couldn't listen to him go on and on about you. But tell me something. Do you really want to marry him, that lazy bum? A child without a husband isn't very nice, but if you look at it another way, maybe it's better to have no husband than that dry fruit of yours. I love him, I confessed. You love him, of course. It's understandable. While you were dating, hugging, kissing, all was well with you. But it's the same for everyone until there are no responsibilities, no children. He's a handsome guy, looking in love, holding your hand, talking nicely. Love, carrots, all those beautiful things. And how did things get complicated? So where did it go, his love? I heard everything. He didn't tell you, Clara. Even though we didn't plan it, we'll get through it and I'll be with you, no matter what you decide, did he? He didn't, did he? No. He started talking about how the baby might not be his and other nasty stuff that made me want to throw up. And I'm not squeamish. I was. So let me ask you a different question. Will you have something to love him for when the passion passes? And it will pass. Can you believe me? There will remain the character of a man, his deeds, for what you can respect. You can despise, you can love, and you can hate. Will there be something to love him for then? Clara lowered her head and bit her lip. Daddy, she said after a short silence. I don't know now. Ethan was the prince from the TV series. Tall, slender, dark-eyed in his movements, the lightness of a predator and the fluidity of water flowing from one position to another as naturally, easily, beautifully as if a river were flowing. And his speech was like a river, as smooth, unhurried, and sometimes like a noisy stream. Clara thought he must smell of water. Fresh, clean, fresh from the spring, but it was the opposite. When she hugged Ethan, she could always smell the woods, resin and herbs and something else, but it was so intoxicating that it seemed impossible to break the embrace. To stand like this, pressed together, and breathe in the smell of my beloved. Inhale it and do not stop, do not get distracted. You're a river, and it smells like a real forest. She used to say, "Why a river? I don't know. They say I'm a river, but I'm not." But you didn't. You're like a river. You've come into my life and filled it all with you. So you're a river? No, I'm just yours. How many of these conversations have they had? How many unbreakable embraces? How can you forget that now? And now Ethan was nothing like his recent self. Where did he get all this insolence, meanness, anger? The way he kept saying he didn't know if she'd been faithful to him or if she'd gone out with others, as if she could look at others. She didn't notice anyone but him. Clara still loved him, but realized more and more clearly she loved her memories of Ethan and the real him she didn't know at all. She doesn't want to know. I don't want to be a daddy. I don't want to be a daddy. Ethan kept repeating himself. With each word he banged his head against the soft back of the chair. Nancy was quietly looking at her fresh manicure and didn't seem to notice what was happening. She was silently worrying about when her brother would finally calm down enough to talk to her. Ethan groaned for a few more minutes, then lifted his head. "Why don't you say something?" He asked in a perfectly normal voice. "Don't you see your brother's life is a disaster? You could have said something, consoled him, given him some advice." Nancy shrugged her shoulders. "Ethan, you're a fool." Aphoristically, she said. "It's pretty clear," he said. "What do we do now? That gastropub has a crazy daddy. He'll kill me, and he won't regret it. You. Is that how you talk about the girl you love?" "I never loved her." Ethan moaned. "She's cute, she's pretty, and I got carried away for a while." "But what kind of love? You have to pay for pleasure." Nancy said admonishingly. As for everything else, however, for stupidity, for ignorance, for beauty and talent, but pleasure usually costs more than anything else. Thank you for the informative lecture. The brother bowed. But what should I do, huh? So I don't have to go back to it. The sister began slowly, looking up at the ceiling. I warned you that your games in bad neighborhoods to the suburbs and affairs in bedroom communities will not lead to good. But since you didn't listen to me, and you, she pointed her finger at her brother. You didn't. Now we need to find out what options we have to solve the problem. The first option is to offer the girl money for an abortion and make sure she gets proper care and maintenance. Dad, tell her that horror, spontaneous miscarriage, but you will cope. You can overcome this grief together, supporting each other. You don't know that fool, Clara. Ethan said glumly. There's no way she's going to go along with this. People like her have only one goal in this life, to have a bunch of children like a pig and sit among them contentedly while a man works for her and all this litter. So this option is out. Nancy stated nonchalantly. Let's move on to the second option. It's simpler, but also more complicated. Say it. Leave everything as it is and raise the child together. Wow. One option is better than the other. Do you have any other interesting ideas? A third option. I haven't thought of a third one yet. Maybe I should just drop off the radar. Sorely suggested the guy. Why? It's quite possible. Just change your phone number, leave, and that's it. There'd be no place for us to cross paths with her then. He grinned. We'll be on different paths. And her dad's a crazy tire man. He won't be able to find me. Nancy shook her head. No, my dear brother, that won't do. I won't say the platitudes about the fact that if you do, you'll lose your father's financial support in no time. That's half the trouble, if you ask me. Money can be earned. The trouble is, you're incapable of taking care of yourself. And do you know why? And why is that? Asked my brother. Because the created problems need to be solved, and you just want to merge quietly, disappear. Yes, almost all men do that. Ethan was indignant. You'd think. And that's why they almost all lie as they have to. The girl said, they work for miserable wages, live in shanty towns, and in the evenings drink the cheap liquor they're sold under the guise of beer. That's pretty much all of yours. You want to be like that. What's that got to do with it? It's got everything to do with it. Nancy sighed. That it's not those who run away from problems who live well, but those who aren't afraid to face them. Those who solve them. You have a problem, and you want to run away from it. In that case, how long after you get your inheritance will you be on the street? If, of course, you get it at all, and not crawl back under your parents' wing after you've been fired for stupidity from your supermarket cashier position? Inheritance. Ethan grumbled. What's there to talk about now? Dad's health is good. That's fine. It seems to be as far away from the inheritance as the moon, but it'll come sooner or later. And frankly, I wouldn't want you to give up your share and then settle down to support me, said the sister. There was so much cold certainty in her tone that Ethan felt uneasy. Nancy was, unlike her brother, the pride of the family, a strategist's mindset, independence, the ability to make quick decisions and put them into action, and a persistence so persistent that God forbid she should dream of it. A robot, not a woman. Ethan joked, but deep down he admired his sister. That's why he ran to her for advice whenever he had the slightest difficulty. Usually she managed, thinking quickly, assessing the situation correctly, and giving excellent advice. But today, it seemed that even Nancy could not give him any advice, but she spurred his own imagination. "You're a good girl, sister," he said and clapped his hands together. "I think I've figured out what to do." The beer was disgustingly diluted. Ethan forced himself to swallow what was already in his mouth, but he set the mug aside. The bulky man sitting across from him was also his future father-in-law. He looked at the guy with bewilderment. "Do not like it?" he asked. "You'll have to excuse me, Christopher," replied Ethan. "You know, I'm not very good with beer." But I couldn't explain to this fat and aging man that beer was at least something you could try at Oktoberfest before it became too popular. Well, or at least in the Czech Republic. And what you can buy for pennies at the supermarket is not beer. It's rat poison. Suit yourself. He smiled. But I like to drink beer in the evening at work. You know, you get tired, so here it is. He lifted the bottle. Relaxes me, relieves stress, and puts me in a positive frame of mind. Ethan nodded politely. That's what my father says. Christopher immediately seized on the mention. He's a good man, your father, a hard worker. By the way, it's about time we got to know each other. What do you think? Because look, you and Clara are about to get married. You'll soon become parents, and we haven't even seen the matchmakers yet. It's not right. Yes? Ethan mumbled uncertainly. But, you know, we have such a family, such a... Well, family is family. The man interrupted him. Whatever they are, they're our own. You just bring them to us, and we'll make friends. Ethan was silent. You're in trouble, you idiot. You're in trouble. He should have listened to his sister, because she'd always told him to socialize with people in his own circle. And she was right on the money, you bastard. Well, what? The son of an entrepreneur. For a minute, a man with 2 higher education, who for fun is studying a 5th foreign language, may have in common with the daughter of the owner some lousy tire shop. He's just a common bastard anyway, and his daughter is the same, even if she is beautiful. Fool! Ethan berated himself for the umpteenth time this evening. If you want a taste of tart exoticism, you can have it. You know he lied, following a momentary burst of inspiration. I don't want you to meet my parents because I'm embarrassed, because they're, well, how should I put it, unusual people. Do they drink? Christopher raised his eyebrows. So, yeah, sure, it's a scary thing. But you can talk to them. If they want to quit, so I will organize treatment. I have a brother in New York just from addiction. He's a great doctor. He's got a whole clinic. Sure, yeah, I'll have to talk to them about it. Maybe they'll agree. That would be very good. It'll be fine, Ethan, as long as they want to live sober. The boy's got his head down. I'd like to postpone your acquaintance after all, especially since Clara's pregnant. Why should she go to all this trouble? She doesn't. But will they even come to the wedding? I guess they said they'd try, but they didn't make any firm promises. So we'll meet them in a week. Christopher shouted contentedly and took another big sip of his disgusting beer. The wedding was bearing down on Ethan at the speed of sound, but now he was looking forward to it. Each new day brought the lad closer to the coveted day, the release. The plan he had devised was simple and brilliantly thought out. They, that is, both Clara and her crazy father should be disappointed in me. He informed his sister. They should realize that it's better to be a single mother than to be married to a jerk like me. With tireless energy, he invented new ways to convince the bride, especially the future father-in-law, of his repulsive nature. When do you think you'll get a job? Christopher snapped at him. Your bride is not an elephant. 2 years pregnant will not walk. But I'm looking for something. Ethan turned around. I haven't found anything yet. All right, you'll come to my tire shop. I'll teach you everything myself. I'll pay you well. If you work well, you'll start earning well. This conversation was repeated with depressing regularity, and in the end, Ethan Ethan saw a suitable occasion to demonstrate once again his unsuitability for family life. The only thing left to do was to summon up the courage. "I don't want to work." Bluntly, he declared one day to Clara and Christopher. "Why should I? My parents still give me money, and as soon as the child is born, I will also get an allowance from the state." How much did Clara find out? But no matter how much it is, it's still money. "And when the baby grows up?" asked the girl anxiously, looking at the groom. "The allowance will end, and the older the child, the more money is needed for him. The allowance will run out, but Clara, the parents won't," Ethan assured her. "And when it ends and but so then there will be an inheritance, and not a small one. By the way, I've already decided what we'll spend it on. We'll buy a big house and rent it out. It's for passive income. You do nothing and the money drips. It's beautiful. And you and I will go to Thailand. Life is very cheap there. We'll have enough rent money for 2 people. "Why 2? What about the baby? Or don't you plan to take him with you?" "Oh, Clara," Ethan said reproachfully, "you can't just think of yourself. Where do you want to take the baby? To Thailand?" "No, you can't even ask me that. Of course, you shouldn't take the child with you, because of the climate change, insects, kindergarten, school, medicine. In short, we'll leave him here. Let Grandma and Grandpa take care of him, and we'll go there to rest. We can come and visit once in a while." "But wait, Ethan." "Why?" Christopher stepped in. "I think it's a great plan. We can implement it. At least I'll make a man out of my grandson. Daddy will not teach him anything good. Right, Clara?" "You're starting again." Offended, Ethan said, and was silent for a long time. "That's how you try to offend me, to humiliate me." "And for what?" "Because I want to arrange everything so that Clara and the child would be happy. It's better to separate mother and child." Ethan was silent, but in his heart he felt that he had just won a small but important victory. Let them continue to think that he was a foolish, worthless, twitchy idiot from whom nothing could be expected. The next day he showed up at his fiancée's house drunk and diligently made noise in the entryway, until Christopher peeked out of the apartment and threatened to call the police. "Oh, come on, Dad." Ethan swung the bottle in a cartoonish fashion. Some of the wine spilled over his head and ran down his face. Ethan wiped away the alcohol and licked his palms. Christopher looked at him in disgust, which was exactly what the groom's script called for. "Oh," he said, smiling stupidly. "Can I call you Dad? Dad? Dad is just right. It's you." "Go home," Christopher advised him. "Go before I turn you in to the police." "So how do you go home?" Ethan was indignant. "I'm here to see my sweetheart." "Yes, Clara, yes, my little darling." Come here, come here." He pinched his bride's cheek. "I can't do anything without my Clara. I can't do anything without her, Daddy. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I can't see you," said Christopher. "Get out, and don't you dare breathe your booze on my daughter. You'll come back when you're sober." Having waited a few more days after the drinking performance, Ethan again came to the guests and demanded a wedding present from his future father-in-law. "So you don't have to worry about what to get us. You know how they give us all kinds of awful junk, and then people agonize, they don't know where to put these gifts. So let's make a wish list, like some people do." "Do what?" "Well, wish list means wish list. The guests will familiarize themselves with it, and then everyone will decide what to give from this list, and there are only the necessary things." "I think you'll give us an apartment," he said. "But I'm telling you right away, we need a 2-room apartment, a child." "And what will your parents give?" Christopher grinned. Maybe a summer house? You put it on your wish list. The child will need fresh air and vitamins. By the way, I've already looked at a nice cottage near the city. All communications are already pulled up: sewerage, water, electricity. There is near a pine forest, very clean air, and there is a garden, so we won't have to grow apples ourselves. Daddy? Clara laughed, but Ethan stopped her with a gesture. My parents will support us, he said habitually, adding a note of resentment to his voice. Isn't that enough for you? Christopher sighed and shook his head. Unfortunately, yes. If they had raised you to be a man, I'd be much more grateful, honestly. Clara, he turned to his daughter. Why do you need such a husband? Maybe you'll change your mind while there's still time. Daddy, the girl was confused. You wanted to have a child in marriage, didn't you? I did. Dad didn't disagree. But look at him, that father. Then such a father, maybe it's better. Clara, Ethan raised his head in offense. Do you see what's going on here? Your father wants to separate us. Are you just going to keep quiet? Let the child grow up without a father? Because you see, Christopher, you don't like me, do you? Clara smiled and waved her hands. Honestly, Ethan, it seems to me that you yourself want us to break up. I just don't understand why you won't say it openly. Because your crazy dad would cut me to ribbons. Ethan thought, but he only said one thing out loud. Don't be silly, the wedding's in a week. His sister was skeptical of Ethan's plan. It was her nature to be skeptical, she said, and she was probably right. But Ethan still believed in his own strength. Just a little more to go, just another week. They're already at their limit, barely hanging on. Just a little more patience, and the wedding day's in a week. My sister reminded me. Exactly. Ethan exclaimed happily. Exactly. That's just about the day of the wedding. And that's when I'm going to have my main gig, after which, oh, Nancy, I'm going to have such a party to celebrate my release. We'll go to the Canaries. We'll get some people together. Rent a beach and party from morning till night till the ambulances come for us. Sister only gave me a sharp shoulder. Let's see if your idea doesn't fail, she snorted. Don't say gop until you've jumped over it. I've already jumped over, my dear sister. I have. Ethan laughed and hugged Nancy tightly. Clara was pensively going through the countless ruffles on her wedding dress, the dress itself hanging on its hinges on the closet door. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and sat down beside her. It's beautiful, he said, looking at the wedding dress. The ribbons, the lace. I never understood these wedding dresses. After all, for one day it is, and the wedding is off and in the closet. But beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Clara let go of the caressing fabric from her fingers and turned to her father. This is not what I dreamed of, Dad. Not at all. And now I'm looking at this dress and thinking, who am I going to wear it for? Ethan? The man felt that now the girl was ready to tell him something important, special, and kept silent, afraid to scare her mood. You know, when I met Ethan, she said slowly, I felt like I'd met some kind of fairy prince, and not just because he was handsome. He took such good care of me, drove me to school, picked me up after class, fed me at restaurants. Then we went out, went to the movies. Every day? Dad asked. Every day. And it seemed to me that it was like going to the movies. And nothing about it made you suspicious. I did. It was only a couple of weeks later that I suddenly thought, doesn't he have any business of his own? I mean, we were together all the time. From morning till night. It's like he's got no school, no job, nothing. Nothing but fun. I asked him, and he looked at me so strangely and said, I can afford to rest. But here he is all resting and resting. Father snorted. and does not get bored. Yes, and when I found out I was pregnant, I thought that now everything would change for sure. Ethan will realize that now he can't go out like he used to, thinking only about pleasures. That a child will be here soon, and that's a responsibility. You have to think about the future. But the further I go, the more I realize that he's not going to think about anything. You see the way he acts, it's like he's getting cocky on purpose. Christopher didn't know what to say. And what can you say? Clara saw and said it all herself. You can still replay everything, he said softly. Just tell that bum there's no wedding. It's my fault, too. When I found out about it, I was furious. I thought I'd do anything, and the child would be born in marriage, and then the grass would grow back. But you know how they treated it in my time. It was considered a disgrace. That's what I thought out of habit, and then I looked around and everything had changed. What's the point? Now many women give birth to children, but they're in no hurry to get married. What can you do if you're not lucky enough to have a father? We'll raise the kid, work, bring him up. You'll meet a good guy. And this one, what's he worth to you? He's a fool. If only I'd realized who he was before. Sadly, smiled Clara. And now I feel like I have to go all the way. And I keep thinking, well, at least he said that there will be no wedding, even if he refused to marry. Why wait for him to say that? My father was surprised. Can you do it yourself or not? But do you want to? I'll tell him, and I'll throw him down the stairs with my great pleasure, eh? The wedding is the day after tomorrow, Dad, reminded my daughter. Everything is ready, money spent, invitations, restaurant. How can I cancel it all? How then to look people in the eyes? Give it up. Christopher laughed. Who cares? Changed her mind and that's it. If you don't like it, the door's over there. No, you can't do that. Can you marry a jerk? I made a mistake. What can I do? So I'll have to go all the way, said the daughter. And the father realized that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change her mind. She feels sorry for her. She doesn't want to marry that Ethan of hers. She's embarrassed in front of others, but in front of herself, in front of her child. Ethan was getting ready for the wedding. He'd been shopping all day, but he hadn't found anything suitable. What kind of discrimination is this? Why aren't there stores for people who like tattered clothes? What do fashion designers care about? Are they creating some kind of fashion collection? One uglier, one uglier. And where, you may ask, are the fashion collections for the homeless, where in the end, you can get at least a homeless man's masquerade costume? Shopping had worn him out. Ethan was about to fall into despair, but then a brilliant idea struck him. Why look for special clothes? You could just make your own. A pity, of course, but what not to sacrifice for a great cause? All it takes is a little dirt. That's it. Ethan flew home on wings. Once home, he got down to business with all the imagination he could muster. First, he wet the soles of his sneakers with water and carefully walked in them over his sweater and jeans, which he spread out on the floor. The prints were quite convincing, but they weren't the only thing he could do. He found some pistachio ice cream in the fridge and smeared it on his jeans and sweater. Then Ethan poured some instant coffee into a jar and poured it on his sweater. His jeans got a few ketchup stains and a couple of greasy butter stains. Only the finishing touches remained. Ethan, armed with a pair of scissors, carefully cut the sweater along the seam and ripped off the sleeve. Then he stretched the sweater in all directions to add bagginess and was satisfied with his creation. The elegant summer sweater was now unrecognizable. The jeans were a different story. Despite the ketchup, ice cream, and butter, the stupid pants still didn't look bad enough. Ethan stomped around in his sneakers just in case, cut off the back pocket, leaving it dangling on a couple of verses, and in addition, poured a glass of water on one pant leg and poured instant coffee right on the wet spot, then began laboriously rubbing the rich coffee powder right into the fabric. It would be more expressive that way. It really did fix things. Now the pants looked just right. They looked like they'd been pulled out of a dumpster. Ethan marveled aloud, taking another critical look at his clothes. His wedding outfit was ready. Clara sat in the kitchen, melancholy, stirring the sugar in her cup. The wedding dress hung in its former place. The girl had glanced at it without interest in the morning and passed it by. "You're not dressed yet," surprised Christopher. He saw that his daughter was sitting in her pajamas, her hair gathered in a shaggy bundle, and did not even try to look at the clock. He himself had already managed to wake up, eat breakfast, and take a shower. Now he only had to get dressed and could go to marry his daughter. But only the daughter was not in a hurry. Soon the groom will come, and you are unwashed, sitting in your pajamas. How can you do that? What's the matter with you, Clara? Don't you feel well? "I don't want to get married, Papa," she said, without any expression. "I don't." To Ethan, no, you shouldn't marry a man like that. "I only realized last night you can't. It would be a tragedy. It'd be misery, and I've got a baby to think about. Dad, can we still call it off? Isn't it too late? But you found time to change your mind." The father smiled and patted the girl's hair. "Right on the day of the wedding." "Well, better late than never. Your fool is coming, and you'll tell him. Or do you want me to tell him?" "No, Dad, don't. I'll tell him myself. I'll decide. I'll tell him myself." Clara finally looked up at her father with a tired look. "I haven't slept all night." He understood. "Look at the circles under your eyes. Oh, youth, youth? Don't worry, my child," he said quietly. "You've made the right decision." Ethan looked at himself in the mirror again with pleasure. Perfect. He had thought of everything, or almost everything. No, the watch had to come off. He smeared a little olive oil on his hair to make it stick together, then sprinkled it with flour. It was perfectly messy and even somewhat dusty, and the stubble on his face, which he hadn't gotten rid of in 2 days, had grown back sloppily. It remained to pay attention to his nails. The question of manicure was solved very simply. Ethan went outside and sat down on the nearest lawn, digging into the ground for a while. His sneakers, which he had also covered with earth, looked a little more civilized than necessary, and the guy got rid of the laces. Now everything was perfect. It was time to go after the bride. Just before Clara's house, Ethan stopped and took a few deep breaths and exhaled. And so the final act of the play Escape from Family Life began. An important key moment in his plan. Now it is necessary to play. Well, play brightly and even, probably brilliantly. Otherwise tonight he'll find himself a married man. The door was opened for him by Clara herself. "Ethan? What's the matter with you?" "Clara!" He howled and fell to his knees. "Clara, I'm so bad, I'm worse." "Clara, at least beat me. Will it make me feel better?" "Beat me, beat me." Ethan, calm down. "What's this masquerade?" "She's pregnant. She can't fight." "Do you want me to beat you up?" suggested Christopher, who heard Ethan's cries. "Clara, get away. Let me get that slacker." "But Dad," the girl was angry. "You've got time for jokes. The man is so happy." "Without much sympathy," said Christopher. "Maybe he should call an ambulance?" "Clara," howled Ethan. "Clara, my darling girl, my favorite, how are we going to live with you now?" "Daddy's broke. They took everything from us for debts, every last cent. There's no money, no real estate. They took away all the shares. We have nothing left. How are we going to live now? How can I marry you now? My beauty, my Clara. My darling, my darling, my darling. Don't be silent. Tell me something, please. Oh, the girl sighed. Thank God, honestly. What? Ethan stopped howling in surprise and raised his head. Clara, we can't get married now, can we? That's a good thing, she said sincerely. I'm sorry, Ethan. It's probably my own fault for not saying it sooner. But you realize that. What kind of family are you? You don't want it. Neither do I. What about your dad going broke? Of course he is, but maybe it's not that bad. I'm sure he's not that broke or anything. Don't you want to marry me? Ethan interrupted her. Well, yes, I don't. And it's a good thing we realized it before we got married. You don't want to marry me, he repeated, shocked. Clara sighed. I don't. I'm sorry. Ethan rose to his feet and looked at the girl resentfully. So I've been freaking out that now we can't get married. And you? Fuck you. Have a nice stay. Ethan rushed down the stairs and thought that this was it. He was running towards his long-awaited freedom, but for some reason he wasn't happy about it. Good girl, said Christopher. Well done, but don't take offense at him. It's just a slip of the tongue. Don't feel bad, baby. You did the right thing. And Ethan jumped out into the street, without slowing down, ran away from this house, away from Clara, away from her father, away from her child. From this whole nightmare story, for which he was ashamed and for some reason also very offended. As if he had just been betrayed by his most trusted friend. Only now, when everything was behind him, he wanted to ask himself, what was so bad about marrying this sweet, loving girl? And would it have been so terrible to become a father? But it was both painful and pointless to think about it now. He had thought for too long that he was being trapped, lured like an animal into a trap, and he had been ready to do anything to break free. And now he wasn't needed, and it turned out that no one was trying to catch him. And the trap was not a trap. It's he himself made up a hell of a lot of things. But what about it now? What's the point? He ran along the asphalt path, and it seemed that this run could go on, if not forever, then for many, many millennia. Ethan never tired and never wanted to stop, ever. Maybe one day he would collapse from fatigue somewhere in Cambodia, but that would be later, when he was exhausted. Only then, and not before. But this time life decided everything for him. A persistent phone call made him stop. What? Ethan bellowed into the receiver. It was Nancy. Her sister, which was absolutely unbelievable, was sobbing at the top of her voice. What are you crying about? I can't understand a word you're saying. Ethan, come at once. Dad was in an accident. He wasn't saved. Can you hear me? Where is he now? Is he in the hospital? Is he in surgery right now? Do you need anything? How about blood? We're the same type. Ethan, Nancy screamed. Dad's dead. He's dead, you know. You're lying, whispered Ethan. You're lying, aren't you, Nancy? I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. He shouted so loudly that an elderly woman with a dog on a leash, passing by, flinched and stepped away. I don't believe you. Ethan shouted, I don't believe it. You're lying. Nancy, I don't believe you. But he did. Nancy wouldn't joke like that. He knew it. I'm on my way to the lineup. Set the sister through her tears. You come too. I can't on my own. Come, I'm waiting for you, Ethan. Will you come? I'll come, he whispered. I'll I'll come right now, right now." The rest of it went on like an endlessly sad movie, and everything Ethan remembered was somehow very vague. No matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't remember how he'd gotten a cab and gotten to Nancy. He only remembered calling his sister from the car and trying to find out where he was going and where she was waiting for him. And Nancy was sobbing, mixing up addresses, couldn't remember anything. Then she handed the phone to someone and the address was found. Ethan found her almost unconscious, sedated. He had to identify his father's body. Ethan had heard that morgues could be cold, but for some reason he felt neither cold nor warm or anything. His father lay covered with a sheet, and when Ethan looked at his face, he saw almost no damage. That pleased him for some reason. Why? He couldn't remember that either. Maybe he just didn't want his father's face to be disfigured. The funeral, another moment of reverence, lingered in his memory. Ethan only remembered that his sister, despite her grief, had been able to pull herself together fairly quickly and had looked solemnly calm at the funeral, standing at his father's coffin. Ethan was not calm, and he was not calm either. He couldn't make himself feel anything, nothing at all, as if all his emotions had been numbed or taken away at once. He kept watching his father's coffin being lowered into the ground, and only one question kept him in suspense. Why? Why did his father need money? Why had he worked so hard to earn it? Why? Why did he hardly ever leave work? Why did he work like a slave in the galleys? What was it all for if it was all over in an instant? Only now Ethan realized that he had always thought that money could protect him from something. I guess it could, but all the money in the world couldn't stop a truck from going into the oncoming lane. Well, that's just how it is. Ethan couldn't get that thought out of his head. And then, sitting next to his sister at the reading of the will, it all became so unimportant. The money, the share in the business, the stock. What did it matter now? He thought about whether his father had time to look up at the sky. How often did he go out with friends? How many times have he sat on the ocean and watched the fiery, tropical sun sink in? Had he ever even seen the ocean? Or had he never had time to go on vacation? Somehow, that was all that began to matter. Nothing else. Hey, he looked up. Nancy, did you say something? I couldn't hear. You know, it doesn't matter though. Nancy. Ethan put his hand on his sister's shoulder. I want to give up my share of the inheritance in your favor. What? She was confused. What are you saying? Dad made a will for both of us, and you're saying you want to give up everything. Why? Of the two of us. He smiled. You're the one who's always smarter, more responsible. You're determined, strong. You won't let the cause to which our father devoted his whole life go to the wind. And that's why I want you to have it all. It's only fair and just. You should give it to someone who can hold it together and grow it. Not a schmuck like me. I'd really spend it all in a year and end up with nothing. That'd be okay, but I feel sorry for my dad. He put his whole life into this. There's just one thing I'd like to ask you. It's about Clara. I'm not gonna say anything in front of strangers right now. I'll text you, okay? Nancy covered her eyes for a second, then wiped away a tear with her handkerchief. What about you? She asked quietly. What are you going to do? Ethan? He shrugged. Me, I'll watch the sky, the sunsets. I'm leaving, sis. There's nothing more for me to do in this town. He squeezed the girl's shoulder lightly and walked out into the street. The whole world was waiting for him now. For a brief moment, Ethan wanted to go over to Clara's house to say goodbye to her, but he shouldn't have. He managed to realize something about himself. His father lived for work, and he, Ethan, could stay here and live for the child, but he shouldn't do that. There was nothing he could do. Everything in their family, the truest of naturals, fans. Dad and Nancy are work fans, and Ethan, he's a fan of freedom. And that's probably better than being a fan of parenting. It's bound to break the kid. No, better to watch the sunset. He went to the ticket counter and asked for a one-way ticket. Where to? They asked him. Anywhere. Wait for me, though. Anywhere to the ocean, and preferably south. Ethan stepped off the airplane straight into paradise. At least this place looked a lot like it. Tall palm trees waved in the wind, their huge leaves wreathed in opahalas. A wonderful fragrance of flowers wafted in the air. In the distance, but still close, the ocean offered its waters to the sun. The speech of the passers-by was more like the chirping of birds in the morning spring. No luggage, sir? Someone addressed him in passable English. I don't need it. Ethan smiled. The joy, the fullness of life, made him want to sing. Never before in his life had he felt so free. He had a little money. Enough to eat twice at any of the local cafes. And beyond that, he was too lazy to think about it. Tomorrow seemed so far away. There would be a day, there would be food. He went forward, not choosing the road. All paths here would sooner or later lead to the ocean. Nancy had no difficulty in finding Clara's address. She had arrived there in the morning to be sure to find her brother's ex-fiancé at home. She looked at her guest with a noticeably rounded belly, a little plump and surprised. So it is you, Ethan's sister? She asked at last. How odd that you don't look like him at all. Unfortunately, you're right, Clara. Nancy smiled. Not in appearance, not in character, not in content. But that's not why I came here. I know my brother well, Clara, and I know that Ethan is, well, to put it mildly, not the most responsible person in the world. That's just the way he is, despite his many virtues. But I'm not a stranger to his child, and I'm his own aunt. And if you don't mind. Oh, so you want to see the baby? She was delighted. Well, of course, whenever you want. What are we talking about? I would like not only to see, but also to take care of my nephew. Nancy corrected the girl. To take over, so to speak, fatherly duties. Oh, come on, really. No, please, listen to me, because it concerns the baby and his future. First of all, you, Clara, will receive a certain amount of money every month for the baby. Don't argue. Ethan, and you may not know this, has renounced his part of the inheritance in my favor. So I've decided that I'm going to dispose of it this way, with part of the money going to child support and the rest for your baby to inherit afterward. Well, in short, when his time comes to receive the inheritance, and until then I will try to see to it that the share of my nephew did not depreciate, but on the contrary, became more. I hope you won't object and argue with me. No. It is obvious to me, for example, that this is the right and just decision. You won't challenge it, will you? No, I know you wouldn't. Nancy, I just wasn't ready. I understand everything you could tell me, that you're not in need, that your father will help you. But I still think it's justice. Don't deny me the chance to right my brother's wrong. I beg you very much. 8 months in the tropics will get to anyone. Ethan knew that now. Personal experience is nothing to be trifled with. Don't confuse tourism with emigration. Tourists fly in for a week's vacation, decide they're in paradise. Here, the sun is always shining and the ocean breaks its waves on the shore, and over the shore carried snow-white seagulls. For some reason, he realized now that it was time to go home. He had a sudden urge to see his sister, to see how she was doing, and to visit Clara. The baby must have been born by now. though Ethan had stopped counting the months long ago. He just lived, not caring about the numbers on the calendar or the days of the week. Sometimes hired for a paltry wage to load bananas for export. Sometimes for a bowl of food, he agreed to wash dishes in local eateries, sometimes begging. Once even had an affair with a pretty mulatto. But alas, the passion quickly faded because they could not explain themselves to each other. Miracle Girl chattered in some unknown language and did not understand a word of English. But still their love passion allowed Ethan to live without hunger for several weeks. His beauty was a great cook, and there was always food in the house. That marvelous little girl worked in a cafe as a cook. There was a brief period in this strange life of his, full of coincidence, when Ethan got involved with a local gang, and for a while he robbed them and ran away from the police. Though, to be honest, he hadn't had to run away very often. The police here had an easy time turning a blind eye to a lot of things. If, of course, to offer the officers of the law a small cash reward, in general, it was very understandable. There were far more petty thugs than policemen in this banana paradise, and everyone wanted to live in peace. Strangely enough, Ethan liked it. At first, it even seemed that he would not part with his new friends and would eventually become the new Pablo Escobar. He was prophesied to have a great future. At first, it rounded his head and encouraged him. But then Ethan somehow got bored of it all at once. Who does not know, he may think that the life of any romantic from the big road can be anything dangerous, luxurious, frightening, saturated. But Ethan has personally experienced that even in such a profession, there is enough of its routine. One day he just left, quietly, without saying goodbye or throwing a party. His associates probably thought he'd been hit by a bullet in one of the endless street shootouts. It was a common occurrence. No one was looking for Ethan. And now he was standing on the shore, thinking that spring was probably in full swing back home, and for the first time in a long, endless time, he wanted to walk the familiar streets and hear his native speech. Yes, it was time to go back. He said to himself, "It's definitely time now." If he got a job loading bananas again, he could save up for a ticket in a month. Clara was cradling her tiny son and softly singing a lullaby to him. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and looked at two of the dearest and most beloved people in the world, Clara and baby No. Nothing is more precious than this. He thought, for the umpteenth time there isn't, and there won't be. Life, ongoing, endless from father to daughter, from daughter to grandchild. Clara caught her father's gaze and smiled. He had already fallen asleep. She said in a whisper. Christopher gently took the child in his arms and moved him to the crib. "Do not regret it?" he asked. "For what?" The daughter did not understand. He did not know what to answer. Probably about everything at once. About having a baby. About Ethan not working out. "Nonsense, Dad. Why should I regret it? I had such a wonderful son. And Ethan, what the hell with him? Besides, Father has noticed that you seem to have a new boyfriend." Well, you think I didn't notice the way that Doctor looked at you? I even came to see you off in person when you were discharged. You can't be fooled." Clara laughed. "He's kind of looking after me, and I like him a lot too. Although, of course, it's too early to talk about something serious." "What's the hurry?" "There's no hurry." Christopher agreed. No rumbled softly in the crib. Clara came over, but her father gestured for her to stop. "It's all right, I'll do it." He rocked the crib quietly and sang a lullaby to his grandson. Clara looked at her father and her heart warmed. The eternal circle of life from parents to children, from children to grandchildren. and nothing is more important than that nothing. Ethan. Nancy shouted when she saw her brother on the doorstep. He was terribly overgrown, dirty, and dressed in some strange rags. A veritable shambles. But it was her brother. She couldn't help but recognize him. "How I've missed you, little sister, how you've become." Nancy had clearly crossed the threshold between angular girl and young beautiful woman in a matter of months. She had put on a little weight, but it suited her remarkably well. Her cheeks, shoulders, and breasts had plumped up. Her movements had become fluid, and she had dyed her hair a couple of shades darker, just enough to accentuate her fair skin and emphasize her eyes. "How beautiful you've become." Ethan said sincerely, "And you?" "I've been going places no decent person should go. I'll tell you about it someday, or even write a book." Later, his sister interrupted him. "Tell me the most important thing. Did you come back for good? I mean back to a normal human life. You see, I need someone I can trust." "No, Nancy, I'm sorry." He even put his hands out in front of him, like he wanted to protect himself from his sister's words. "I can't. I wanted to see you. Just to be home. It's been a while, but you can't ask for more than that. I wish I could help you, but it's not my thing. Constancy, business, home, I'll only make things worse. I'll run away at the worst possible moment." "Then what?" "But maybe you could at least think about it." Nancy suggested it. "It's not like I'm suggesting you chain yourself to the office. We could find you something remotely, even something as simple as that, for starters. And then before you know it, you'll be up to your neck in business." He stopped his sister gently. "It's not for everyone. Sis, people like you like it, but it doesn't suit me at all. No offense to me, but suit yourself." Nancy lowered her head with a sigh. "I'm sorry, of course, but I suppose it's true. Everyone should do his own thing, what his soul is drawn to. You've grown up, sister." Ethan grinned. "So have you." She answered him in the same tone. "You haven't changed either. Have you been to see Clara? She's married, but I'm still doing what you asked me to do. She gets good alimony, and when your son gets older." "Thank you, Nancy." Ethan meant what he said. He didn't come in. "You don't need to bring anything up. She's doing well, and I'm glad of it. She's a wonderful person, very kind and sincere. Everyone would be happy to have such a wife. But not you." My sister smiled sadly. "I am not suitable for Constancy. When it catches up with me, I get mad and start doing such a wild thing that I am ashamed of myself. Why should I ruin a good woman's life? Let alone my own child. Does she have a good husband?" "Yes, a very good husband. He's so protective of her and the baby. They're very happy, both Clara and No. I think in a couple of years they'll give No a brother or sister." "Well, that's good." Ethan smiled. "And now I'm going to go. It was good to see you by. Will you at least spend the night?" My brother smiled nonchalantly. "I'm not used to sleeping indoors unless the weather's really bad, and then I get nervous. But today it's warm." It felt good to be out on the city streets at night. Not that Ethan was looking for trouble, but somehow he was lucky. Or maybe it was just that it was peaceful at home compared to the tropical paradise. He'd never once run into a mugger, never had to deal with hooligans looking for someone to beat up. You could say the city at night was favorable to him. The streets were bright with streetlights, storefronts, and car headlights. He liked to sit on a bench and look at the road, cars passing by, everything like in life. Everyone goes his own way, and someone will get to the goal safely, and someone because of daredevillery will get into an accident, but will get off only a fright. And some, I didn't want to think about them. Ethan had become a surprisingly friendly man. I guess his life as a homeless man, his new life, had something to do with it. While he was rich, few people treated him kindly, only his colleagues in the racket, and those were gone as soon as he was a pauper. But now he was helped not to die by strangers, whom he knew had only enough. But kind grandmothers' traders sometimes treated him with apples from their stalls. The cook at the street kiosk once took a long look at Ethan squatting on the curb with his alms bowl, then beckoned him over and gave him a huge, freshly cooked shawarma. And that man in the entryway, who wouldn't let the scandalized neighbors kick out in the rain, a vagrant. These are such rays of kindness in a cruel world. You look at it, and you become kinder yourself. And even his seemingly bitchy sister. How happy she was to see his brother. How she persuaded him to stay and return to civilized life, to settle down. But she didn't succeed. Ethan had become too attached to freedom. And freedom he now understood as the complete absence of attachments to addresses, cities, people. Ethan would be howling with longing in a week if he were to go back to his old self. And no money was worth it, no money ever. Today he found a good spot right across the street from the restaurant. People come out of there nice because they're full, and if they're drunk, the catch could be great. True, they were often chased away from fish places, but if you don't worry and try to be inconspicuous, you might get lucky. Without any nostalgia, he looked at the huge, brightly lighted windows and polished steps at the entrance. Was it really only a year ago that he himself had been in places like this every day? Waiters in uniform with polite smiles now seemed to him creatures from another world, and not so long ago he considered them idlers, unworthy of any attention, servants. How are things changing? A few more coins fell into his coin bowl. Ethan raised his head. "Thank you, Ethan." The young woman who had just dropped the change into his piggy bank squatted down and looked straight into the tramp's face. Ethan instinctively pulled back, hiding deeper into his hood. His hair had grown long enough to cover his face, along with his beard. He wouldn't recognize him. He wouldn't even recognize himself now. He couldn't see his old self, no matter how hard he tried. But she did, didn't she? "Ethan? Is that you, Ethan?" Clara kept repeating his name, but he didn't want to respond to it. He hadn't been Ethan for a long time, at least not the Ethan she knew. "You're wrong, girl," he said hoarsely. "That's not my name." "I'm sorry." Clara straightened up and took out a few bills from her purse. "Here you go, please. And sorry again. I thought you reminded me of someone I know." "I'm sorry." He nodded without raising his head. "Clara," someone called out to her. Ethan squinted his eyes. A young man was standing beside a brand new car, opening the doors for his beloved. "I'm coming," she smiled. Her heels clicked on the pavement. The smell of perfume wafted away. She had gone far away, and there was no need to catch up with her. Ethan took some paper money from his piggy bank and hid it under his sweatshirt. "Thank you, Clara." Tonight he would have food and maybe even a little beer. What more could a free man dream of?